You know what? That's where I would be if I was retired too, probably. Right. Yeah. Okay, Phil's got 45 seconds. Because Verizon time says it's time. Gina's here to talk about the budget. This is for the W Reg resounding.
Oh, yeah, okay. Now I know all about that.
Okay. Off we go. Good evening. We will call the September 3rd, 2024 regular meeting of the Township Board of Meridian to order. First order of business this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will those that are able please rise and join me in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is item 3, the roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Hendrickson.
Here.
Clerk Guthrie is here. Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee McCurtis.
Here.
Trustee Trezise.
Here.
And Trustee Wilson. Here. I'm sorry. Trustee Sunland is not here. This is 6 board members are present out of 7.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next on our agenda is item 4, presentations. We have one this evening, our 2025 Township Recommended Budget presentation from Interim Township Manager Tim Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and members of the board. This is a culmination of a great deal of work over the summer from myself and my team. I can't, again, thank enough the M team for their work on this, and notably also Carol Hassey in our HR department, who answered a lot of what I thought were silly questions, but she humored me quite nicely. So this is your 2025 recommended budget. Top line is this. Total budget is just over $65 million. General fund represents about $28 million of that, and we are balanced this year at almost the exact same level we were balanced starting last year. So we're pretty pleased with that going into next year. So far in 2024, I'm a planner, I like to look ahead, but a few things from the year so far. This is actually fire training that was done up in Lake Lansing earlier this year, and they did get the boat back upright. It took them a minute, but they got there. So a couple things I want to talk about. First and foremost, most important thing I think most people would agree in local government is police and fire. This is the epitome of service to the public. And the whole above self. We do it really well here, and proud to state that we are about fully staffed now. We have a plan. The fire and paramedics are, and the police has a plan to be fully staffed by the end of the year. This is due in large part to the decisive action the board took last year to help recruitment and retention. And so in no small part should the board take credit. The board should take a lot of credit for that, because it was your actions that helped get us here. This is from a picture from National Night Out. I pointed out just because it's police and fire getting along, and sometimes they don't always do that. One of the other things that we do really well here in Meridian Township is parks and pathways. And the two things I would highlight from this year is I'm going to go ahead and use MSU to Lake Lansing Phase 1 because it was just before January. But we'll go ahead and take credit for that. Phase 2 is not open yet, public, if you're watching. Please be careful if you go out there. It does need top course of paving. We will have a grand opening for that in the very near future. And Phase 3 is now in design, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We also had great investments in a couple other facilities this year. The two that I would point out are Marshall Park, at the direction of the board. We did revamp the playground out there, and we'll have a grand opening for that as soon as the Parks Commissioners are able to settle on a date. And the Central Park Pavilion, which is got to be one of the most used facilities in the township, was completely revamped this year and looks great. We used it for some of the senior center listening sessions, and has lights, and it's got doors to block the wind, and it's a great little facility. Highly recommend it. And lastly, a couple of things I want to point out, just general community investments, some things that may go under the radar to the average person, but really make us the prime community that we are. This is new signage at our parks and facilities. great example of it here at the dedication of the Ronald Steichen Memorial Pathway. That is the new brand standard that appears at all of our parks and entryways to the township. County Park North Lift Station, without it, sewage would not flow properly on the north side of the lake. So it's those things like that that have to happen for a place to run. The last one that we're really close to finalizing is the emergency warning siren program. We'll have complete coverage for the township here real soon once we get some final inspections done on the electrical connections, and we'll be able to test them out. So it's those things that really, behind the scenes, the average person doesn't see or know about, but this is what makes us such a great community, are the little things that we do really well. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the local road program, although this is a picture from the Okemos Road Bridge. It's a great construction picture. Those guys are getting at it in the concrete, in the cold. But we've invested about $25 million in our local roads since 2013. We continue to push our PASER rating up. The roads are getting noticeably better. We're hitting more neighborhoods, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but 2024 has been another successful year in the local road program. We still got more to come this year. I'll highlight a couple of things. Solar projects still to come at the North Fire Station. We have 2 fire trucks coming this year still. And lastly, we've gotten some good news on the remainder of the Hazlitt Village Square rehabilitation and rebirth, and so we are still very confident that we're going to be able to get that out of the ground this year, or at least in the ground. With all that said, there were some challenges as we look forward to 2025. I don't think any of these are a surprise to anyone. First and foremost, we have to absorb those police and fire costs into the budget now that they've been previously paid using ARPA funds. We have done so in this budget, and we're able to balance it. Our pension debt, as with any community in the state of Michigan, we have an unfunded liability from our pension, and we've done better than a lot. There's still a ways to go, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Our fleet is aging, and we have made great progress on that, and I think in a couple of years here, we're going to be in great shape in the motor pool. We're in good shape now. But the other part of that, though, is I point out the fire truck litigation. As everyone's aware, functionally, we had a lemon from COVID when we purchased our last fire truck, and it's been out of service essentially since we got it. We are moving through litigation with that, and that is an unknown to the future. That's a big 7-figure price tag. And so we just keep that out there as a challenge that we're probably gonna have to address next year. And lastly, just our underfunding of infrastructure costs over the years, and we'll talk about this when we get to the water and sewer in a little bit. So pension perspective, high level, we're at 74% funded. It's the same funding level that we had last year. We're at the state average right now. We've made great bounds in that over the years, but this is where we stand right now. We're pretty comfortable moving forward because we've made those investments in the past and we'll continue to make those investments for the police and fire pensions, which are the largest unfunded pensions. I will point out that MERS did change the projected market return this year from 7 to 6.93% on your ARC payment, so your minimum payment necessary. That did have an increase on the minimum payment necessary, and we've absorbed that as well. But one of the things we did do smartly in 2017 was start modified plans for certain groups, and those are very well funded, and those will be the plans going forward that we really do well in, help bring up our averages. So the question everyone asks, how do we get to 100%? This is how you get to 100%. It's about $100,000 more monthly. And so what are we looking at next year? About $300,000, just about $250,000 more above that required annual funding amount. So we are pacing towards that 100% funding, led by the $1.5 million that come out of the police and fire millage on an annual basis. That's somewhat sacrosanct in this budget. That is what's going to get us to funding where we need to be in the pension funds. But on a positive note, we have a growing tax base, and we are a community that people want to live in. We are a community that people want to invest in, and we are a community that has probably the strongest per capita tax base in the region. it's really more of a gut feeling, but when you're within $500 million of Lansing and they're, over double your size, that feels like a pretty strong per capita tax base. Obviously, Delta Township will have something to say about that once the battery plant's fully online, but it's a good problem to have, someone pushing us. So a couple of things I want to point out from the general fund this year. There's limited investment in out of the general fund this year, as it was a pretty tight budget, but there are some targeted investments that we're proposing in this budget. First and foremost, the township listening sessions have been a great success the past few years, and we're proposing to budget to continue those. The columbarium design is part of the cemetery operations. Columbariums are where you put cremains after someone is cremated, and there's still a place for them. That is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the industry, and it's something that for the long-term use of the cemetery, for people to be able to use it generations to come, we need to look into that now and start to get a design together for that. And so we are planning for the design on that. The police department has a series of equipment items that need to come online this year, from rifle-rated shields to pistol-rated shields, ballistic vests, speed signs, electronic ear protection, speed signs, I said because I actually meant to say the LED flares there, but a number of things that they need this year that are past their useful life. They also have some office furniture that needs to be replaced to try and finish making the upgrades to that building that we started 2 years ago. Probably the big general fund appropriation this year, the biggest new thing is the striker contract, which is the fire department equipment related to the ambulances. And it's the things that get replaced on a regular basis, the power cots, the monitors. That's about a $215,000 addition to the general fund. Previously, that was paid for out of ARPA dollars last year. So that's what's coming online. And lastly, Communications is proposing to slightly expand the Prime Meridian magazine because it's still really popular. A lot of places have gotten away from their print magazines, but it's still really popular here, and so might as well build on a good thing. Staffing, there are limited staffing changes this year. Essentially, we're proposing 4 things: a part-time human resources administrator and a full-time sewer utility worker are the 2 new positions, and then 2 modifications, police lieutenant, so that we can balance out their organizational chart and go essentially from what was previously 2 captains to 2 lieutenants. And taking our environmental engineer, which is currently a 32-hour-a-week full-time position, environmental sustainability coordinator, Leroy Harvey, who's retiring, and taking that and making it a full-time sort of environmental engineer and getting a little more technical expertise there. But largely, in total, it's a total of 3 positions when you add it all up in the budget. Long-term, though, and I said that I've told everyone that I'd share this information. There are other needs. There were other asks this year. This is roughly the order in which they got cut from the budget as I got into the nuts and bolts, but these are things that we probably need to start looking at in greater detail next year for next year's budget. Specifically the fire inspector and the utility billing, whether that's a supervisor or a superintendent, we still need to work out. Those are the 2 big ones, but we definitely need another IT person. And as we stabilize the water and sewer funds further, we are going to need additional utility workers in those positions because, as I've said, both in this role and my other hat role of the Community Planning and Development Director, we are moving from a community, this greenfield community that just builds new and lives off that growth, to a brownfield community that needs to make investments in the existing infrastructure more and more. And so that's where those utility workers are going to come into play. Township board policy for our fund balance is 25%. Our proposed budget is at 48%. So this is the breakdown between the pension stabilization fund, the capital projects fund, and the general fund. And I just want to hammer this point home because if you look at the line item that currently exists versus the numbers in the letter and the numbers in this presentation, they don't quite match, because this is assuming that we follow through on the board's direction to do a 3rd quarter budget amendment to transfer the funds from the fund balance to the motor pool to purchase the fire truck that has to be replaced this December. And so you'll see that in October, and then all these numbers will make sense again, and they'll match up. This is what the motor pool will look like next year in terms of purchases. Roughly, it's very similar to this year from a financial perspective. The big thing that I would point out here is this is the last full replacement of an ambulance. After this, there's a program that is actually re-chassis. It's a slightly more affordable program that gets us additional life out of our initial investment. And so this is one of the, I believe, the last one before we start re-chassising. Capital Projects Fund, there's 4 proposals out of the Capital Projects Fund this year. Solar array at the Historic Village, which I again will point out, I think this is gonna be our best one from an educational perspective, just given all the school groups that come through there. Very excited about this project. Renovation of the municipal bathrooms, which was one of the things that wasn't done when we did the building last year. And then generated the service center and the public safety building, still areas that need painted now that we've done almost everything else over there. So meat and potatoes of local government, local roads. And so this is what 2024 looked like when we budgeted for it. It's actually slightly larger than this because as we've explained, we've pulled forward some of the 25 roads to this year to be able to get them done. And I'm happy to report all the concrete fixes for those roads are done. So now we can start scheduling the actual paving of these roads that we pulled forward. Our concrete contractor is phenomenal. Would highly recommend them to anyone. But this is what the year looked like. It's a lot of maintenance. So you have 26 essentially miles of maintenance so we can maintain the investments that we've made over the past several years, and then about 6.25 miles of reconstruction. And so that's where we take the worst of the worst out of the rotation, redo them, so their PASER rating is now 10, and then we maintain them in future years. And so this is what 2025 is expected to look like, about 13 to 14 miles of maintenance and 6.25 miles of reconstruction. We will announce the final plan for the 2025 paving projects once we have engineering done and we know it's gonna work in the budget. And that usually comes later this year. But this is what we're aiming towards, to increase our PASER rating, goal of trying to get to an 8 across the system. That's what most communities want, is to get to an 8, because that means all of your roads are generally in good condition, and at that point you can really focus on maintenance and hit the worst of the worst when you need to hit them. And so we're making progress. It's slower than I think anyone would like, and I think everyone would recognize that the COVID pandemic and the associated cost increases really hit this program hard, but we're still making good progress. And I'm happy with where we're going, and we'll continue to work on this as we move forward, because this is what people see every day. Do I have a pothole at the end of my driveway? Am I driving on smooth roads to get to my job? This is one of the keys of local government. And as a charter township, we don't always have this opportunity to be able to directly impact our roads, and I'm glad we do here, because we can take on that role and not just punt it off to another agency and try and explain to our residents why we can't give them that service. The other piece of the paving puzzle is our pathway projects. We have a phenomenal pathway system here, and it only gets better every year. This is the phase 1 of MSU to Lake Lansing, the picture that you see here. Phase 2, as I mentioned, coming very shortly, and in 2025, we hope to build phase 3. It's currently in design and easement discussion where we need them. And so if we can get that to the point of construction, we will build it. If not, we'll push it off one more year and get it in 26. But we really hope to do this next year. And at that point, right, you have a pathway that can get you from MSU's campus all the way out to Lake Lansing Park North, non-motorized. And that's a great achievement for any community. And we should be very proud that this idea that people had, over a decade ago we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now of finishing a very large project. So kudos to the township. Water and sewer funds, we are proposing somewhat substantive increase, a very substantive increase in the water side of things, with a much smaller increase on the sewer side of things, and an overhaul to the ready-to-serve fee. The ready-to-serve fee is the fee that everyone pays, and that is essentially the cost for us to provide service to you. We currently have a flat rate across the board. What we're proposing is to more equitably distribute those costs over the larger users, i.e. the non-residential users that have huge meters, it costs more to service. The idea that it's gonna cost me the same to service a 4-inch meter as a 5/8 meter at someone's home is just not realistic. And so that's what the change to the ready to serve fee is gonna be, to more equitably distribute those. This will help put us on a more sustainable path in the long term. But again, we are still easily the lowest rates in the region. And I'm sorry if this isn't bigger, but there's a lot of data on here. The upshot is the next closest is Bath Township, and we're still a solid 13 points below them. And Grand Ledge is over double on the other side of the region. So we're still well below our peers. And one of the things that I like to point out is that, you know, everyone does water and sewer projects, right? We all grab from the same pool of contractors. And when we get a bid, it's a similar bid to what someone else is getting, only they have more money to pay for it because their rates are higher. And so we're on that side of things paying more money but don't have the funds coming in to support those rates of construction. So there's a lot of different reasons, but this will get us to a more sustainable path and hopefully get to a lesser amount of increases on an ongoing basis. The board did have a number of suggestions for some policies that we're looking into that we'll bring forward hopefully still this year for how we address this on a go-forward basis, tying it to inflation, tying it to how do other communities do it. So we're looking into those at this point. So these are the only, right now there are only 2 projects budgeted for water and sewer. That's the Forest Hills Lift Station and a project in Tower Gardens. I've left the Grand River Gate Valve project down here out of the water fund because that is a project that needs to be funded. And we are going to try and find a way to fund that at some point. But it needs to stay on everyone's radar because that's going to come up again and again and again until it happens because of the potential problems it could lead us to down the road. So we were trying to get out in front of this one a little bit if we can. Our park system is probably the best park system around. We have a phenomenal park system that doing no small part to retired Director Maisner's leadership and all the wonderful people in the Parks Department. People love coming here. Everyone talks about sporties for shorties. I like bobbers with coppers, but that's not the official name of it. But that is the fishing off of the dock that we have into one of our ponds, and it's kind of fun to see kids catch their first fish, right? Like, it's an interesting life experience for the first time. But what are we doing next year from Parks and Recreation perspective? We've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. We need to figure out if we can accommodate cricket in the township. It's a fast-growing sport. It's one of the things that we get the most questions about. Obviously pickleball is probably number 1 at this point, but cricket is high up there. So it's time to look and see if it's doable in the township, or if we can partner with one of our other community organizations, schools, county parks to make something happen. Tower Road Park is getting some love this year. First off, the baseball field needs restored and rejuvenated to keep it in rotation in years to come. The other part of this, though, is the inclusive playground, and that's the idea that anyone of any ability will be able to use that space. It's becoming a very popular and important thing in local government. I look only to Lansing and the one that was installed at Adada Riverfront Park to see just how popular these can be. And so I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This may become the new norm. This might be how we do things going forward. Ottawa Hills Park is a small neighborhood park that'll get restored this year. Marshall Park has some additional amenities that need to happen. And the Okemos Road property, the Parks Commission has vetted all these projects and recommended them, but the Okemos Road property will be part of our trail system that is now, going to stretch from east to west across the entire township. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the Red Cedar Waterway, because once we start getting it cleared, we got to keep it cleared. So in summary, clearly a year of needs, not once. This is what we need to do to keep our level of service where it's at. But we have a very stable financial outlook. If we keep growing our tax base the way we have the last 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to be fine for many years to come. And that is solid growth. That's not like living off of a sugar high and getting 1 year of like 100 new homes. That's consistent, steady growth because people want to be here. We have just enough properties on capping that the values continue to go up. And generally, I would argue this budget really gets us to continued improvement across the board. We're continuing to eliminate our legacy debt. We're continuing our commitment to environmental stewardship and sustainability. We're continuing our commitment to recruiting and retaining the best talent, continuing our commitment to improving our local roads, and continuing our commitment to our parks, open space, and pathway system. And so that is the summary of the recommended 2025 budget. I look forward to having a conversation with the board on this later in the agenda.
Thank you very much, Interim Manager Schmidt. We appreciate that. We look forward to both the public hearing and the discussion item later on our agenda on this topic. Next up on our agenda is item 5, citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. We do have a number of green cards for members of the public here. And so if there are several opportunities tonight for public comment, members of the public who do wish to address agenda items or anything not on our agenda have an opportunity to do so at the beginning of the meeting, at our hearing on the township budget, specifically to that topic, or at the end of the meeting on any topic. Those who do wish to address the board must complete a green card, which are located on the table near the door, and present the card to either a board member or the township staff. When it's your turn, I'll call you up to the podium to speak to the topics indicated. While it's not required, it is helpful for the sake of our meeting minutes if you do give us your name and address prior to your comments so that we can record that information for the minutes. Citizens are limited to 3 minutes of public comment. An automated system will keep track of the time, and an indicator light and beep will alert you when your time has expired. Members of the board do value comment and input from our public. The meeting format and rules, however, do restrict board members from engaging in conversation with commenters or answering questions directly. Questions and concerns may be addressed by board members at a later time or referred to a member of the staff to follow up on. Please make sure to address all comments to the board or the board's chair and not to individual board members or to others in the audience. With that said, we do have several green cards, as I mentioned. First up this evening is Chris Clock, and then Deborah Major will be on deck.
Chris Clock, 4538 Seneca Drive. I am here to voice opposition to the property adjacent to Faith Lutheran Church being rezoned as multifamily residential. This area should remain single-family residential. Looking at the criteria that's required on the reasons for rezoning request, it actually meets none of them. First, the development does not address the community need. Additional rental properties are not needed in the community. While the population grew in the township by 4,228 from 2010 to 2020, the U.S. Census Bureau population estimate for July of 2023 showed a slight decrease in population of the township. The U.S. Census Bureau also shows the percent of owner-occupied housing to be 57.5% in Meridian Township, which is far less than the 72.5% for the state of Michigan, 64.8% for the United States, and 58.8% for Ingham County. There's 3 local close apartment complexes, all of which have vacancies, so none of this supports the need for additional rental properties. Number 2, the development is not compatible with other existing uses surrounding the site. The largest bordering area is single-family homes on the east and the west, with a church to the south. The property that does exist on the northern edge that is multifamily residential maintains a buffer of trees and landscape between them and the surrounding homes. This massive multifamily development uses every square inch of the 4.2 acres and does not fit this area at all and is far too dense for the land. Number 3, the requested rezoning would result in significant adverse impacts on traffic circulation, water and sewer systems, and the environment. MDOT, as far as traffic, MDOT data for station 33-5056 Dobie Road south of West Grand River near Minoka Trail has an average annual daily total of 8,800 cars. Using ITE trip generation data, 60 units allowed would increase traffic by approximately 840 cars per day, which is a 10% increase on a 2-lane road that has no right and left turn lane. Replacing acres of undeveloped land with 4.2 acres of concrete will impact the drainage systems negatively. If rezoning is approved and drainage issues develop where none currently exist, the responsibility will lie solely with the rezoning. Number 4, this is not in the master plan. 2.8 acres of this area is in the master plan. However, there are 1.4 acres that are not. So increasing the size of the project by 50% changes the scope and the impact of the project sufficiently as to render it inconsistent with the master plan. This rezoning also directly conflicts with other stated goals of the master plan, such as preserving the character of single-family neighborhoods, which is on page 8 of the master plan. For all of these reasons, rezoning to multifamily residential should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah Major, and then Peggy Anderson is on deck.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Major, and I reside at 4570 Seneca Drive, and I have lived there for 24 years. I respectfully request that you vote no on the rezoning listed today as ordinance 2024-06, the rezoning that you're going to discuss later. My neighbors and I have spent a considerable amount of time presenting before the Planning Commission, and they recently voted 4-1 against this rezoning in July. This same rezoning request was before the Planning Commission in 2019, and it was voted down unanimously 7-0. It is my hope that you have received all of the comments, the letters, the signed petition from 72 of my neighbors opposing this rezoning. This land doesn't support multifamily development. It would be a burden on traffic, drainage, safety, just to name a few. Nothing has changed from the original 2019 request to this current request. The only difference is that, unbeknownst to the neighbors, this rezoning was written into the master plan, but as stated earlier, only 2.8 acres. It was requested to be rezoned by a very motivated seller, the church, and supported by a very eager buyer, the Fedewa Company. None of the neighbors were notified in order to speak about the change in the master plan. Tim Schmidt told me at a listening session in July that the master plan is merely a suggestion, however. Therefore, I urge you to vote no on this rezoning because it would be a detriment to the existing traffic, neighborhoods, and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Anderson, followed by Jean McDonald.
Peggy Anderson, 4504 Seneca Drive. I've lived in this home for 31 years, and my home backs directly onto Faith Lutheran Church. While we've mentioned that in the 2023 master plan, one of the suggestions is to preserve existing neighborhoods, that's us. We are an existing neighborhood. I'm a 1963 house. I'm the last house built in that northern part of the Seneca Drive. That's a 1950, 1960s neighborhood. We never have an empty house. You put a house up for sale in our neighborhood, it's gone like that. And that's even with the closing of Edgewood School. You know, preserve our neighborhood. We are one of the existing neighborhoods. When you look at the section that's asked to be rezoned from single family to multifamily, on 3 sides of a 4-sided rectangle, it's already single family. We're single family to the west, we're single family to the east. There's lots of discussion about it being adjacent to the multifamily apartments to the north. That's one side of the 4 sides. Preserve our neighborhood. I have 2 other major concerns for the density of this rezoning request, and one of them that's important to me is traffic. I am assuming all of you drive down Dobie Road at some point, so you know what the traffic is like on Dobie Road. You know turning left and right can be a potential tragedy on Dobie. But on Seneca, we're the cut through. We're the 2-lane with no gutters, no sidewalks, 2 bus stops. And when you come down Hamilton toward that light at Dobie and it's backed up, you drive down Seneca and then you cut through on Shaker. And if you put more cars coming out of those drives where that rezoning will be, you're going to have lots more people do that cut. Shaker up Seneca back to Hamilton and the reverse. Because you can see ahead to the light that it's backed up. You can see ahead that it's backed up because people are turning in and out of those drives on that 2-lane. And right now, we already have the police putting up, here's your speed limit sign on Seneca, or no through traffic signs. You're going to hit a child on a bike. You're going to hit somebody waiting for a bus. I'm also concerned about drainage. Right now, we had a really great storm the other day with heavy rain. My part of Seneca, which goes to the low spot, that's if you've never driven down it, there's a tremendous elevation change on Seneca. And at the low spot, you already have an easement with major drains built into the easement. And it runs like a river down through my front yard to that easement. And where this rezoning request is, will put its water retention ponds right adjacent to where those drains already exist in the easement. I don't want my basement flooded because you hardscape what's not a hardscape right now. I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jean McDonald, and then David Buki.
I'm still gimpy. I've had both my knees done and they have not healed equally. Jean McDonald, I live at 2019 Lac Dumont in Hazlet, and I sit on the Senior Center's Advisory Committee, and so I have some suggestions from you for that. I got here early so that I could read the agenda. I like to have that. At 6:50 or 5:50, there was still no agenda. And so I complained to that. I think your agenda should be out at least a half an hour ahead of time so that people who want to come early and have not had a chance to see the agenda get a chance to read that. I have another suggestion for you. I have not seen the budget before. I don't think that the Senior Center Advisory Board has seen that. When we were asked to give, the information that we wanted, it said it's online, it's in over 300 pages in fine print, and we were supposed to find all that. I would recommend that when you do the budget, that when you have agencies that work for the community, that you give them a copy of the budget and make it at least readable in larger print. What you did when you did the Yonkers change to buy that, none of us could even read some of the fine print. And so I think that would be helpful. Might be even helpful to show your budgets to the high schools so that they would have that, that they could look at it and get kids interested in what are the issues. Let's see. One of the other things that I think is missing greatly, and we have not been able to get the information, is what will the changes in taxes be for the things that still need to be done and be improved on. Now, I sat on the Ingham County Road Commission for 6 years. You cannot trust all the engineers. When we went out on the jobs to look at them, they were not always what the engineers said versus what the farmers said. I have friends who live near the corner of Okemos Road and Mount Hope. You are narrowing the lanes. I almost got hit twice trying to get out of their driveway from people trying to speed up because you don't have as many lanes anymore. And it's going to get worse now that the students and things are back. So I beg you to please consider some of our concerns, that we get our information, and take a look at that intersection there. I hate to see somebody really get hurt. Thank you.
David Buki. And this is our final green card. If anyone else wishes to speak, please turn in a green card.
So hello, I'm Dave Beakey.
Buki, I'm sorry.
It's a hard one to get. I live at 4512 Seneca. I live next door to Peggy. The church is in my backyard, and the Adobe Road is what I'm talking about. That's a couple hundred feet to the north. But in any event, I'm here to support the neighborhood, and they don't want the rezoning, and I support that. So please don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have one more green card, but it appears as though this person wishes to speak again at the end of the meeting, so we'll hold on to that till the end. Anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 6:40 PM. Next up on our agenda is interim township manager report. Mr. Schmidt, do you have a report for us this evening?
I will be brief because no one needs to hear me any more than I already have spoken. Fire Department Open House, October 6th, 1 to 5, details to come. I have mentioned the final paving on local roads is going to happen here real soon. Just waiting on a couple last details for that. You may recall the Williamstown Township Police contract is up at the end of this year. Chief Gurlow reached out to Supervisor Bloomquist. We do have a draft circulating with the township. We will have this back for the board's discussion in the future. We are predicating any increase in service to them on us being fully staffed at this point. So we'll discuss that more when we get to that point. Deer call is projected to be at 300 deer again this year. The population is, we are on a stable trajectory, still taking that many deer. So that tells us a lot. Pancake breakfast, Saturday, 242 Church, 8 o'clock to 11. I will be there at 8 o'clock because we have swim lessons that we have to get to, but we need to get breakfast in before that. And Consumers Credit Union grand opening is coming September 24th, and we'll get details of that out as soon as we have it finalized. And that's all I have this evening.
Any questions for interim manager Schmidt? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is board member reports of activities and announcements. Any board members have any activities and announcements to report? Treasurer DeShane.
I will make a community announcement. The Rotary Annual Hero Luncheon is a week from today, the 10th of September at noon at Marketplace on the Green. The community is invited. The $25 donation requested, and we're going to have a couple of speakers talk about heroes in the township. Also, I'll make a note that in our audience tonight is Township Trustee-elect Nicholas Lenz. And Nick, welcome, and glad to hear that you're here and observing the board in advance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other board members? Clerk Guthrie.
Real quick, thank you Supervisor Hendrickson. It is National Voter Registration Month. So for all you residents, voters out there who are listening, please check if you don't know your voter registration information on michigan.gov/vote. If you have questions about your status, about your absentee ballot, about if you've moved, if you've changed your address, you can do all of that on the State of Michigan website. If it's difficult to do, I know sometimes it can be difficult to manage computers and get it to do everything that you want, please contact our office. We are happy to help. Clerk's office at meridian.mi.us.
Thank you very much. Other board members? I will simply add that last week my family was pleased to take part in Sporties for Shorties, which is a fabulous program put on by our Parks and Recreation Department. Shout out to Coach Mike, who has, I think, coached tens of thousands of kids at this point in the community. It's a great program, and if you've got kids 3 to 5, do it once, do it twice, do it 3 times a summer. It's a good way to get the wiggles out for the little ones. And I also had a conversation with our search firm this morning as they begin their interviews for our next township manager, collecting information for what it is that we might be looking for. And so we'll have more to come on that as the board and others are interviewed. And we hope to open up the application window sometime in early October. So good conversations had. Seeing no other activities and announcements, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is approval of our agenda. Do we have a motion for the agenda this evening? Trustee Wilson.
Move to approve the agenda.
Moved by Trustee Wilson, supported by Trustee Trezise. Any comments on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda carries. Next on our agenda is item 9, our consent agenda. We have a number of items on our consent agenda this evening, including the communications with the board, our minutes from our August 20th, 2024 regular township board meeting, bills, and the State of Michigan firefighter turnout gear grant approval. This grant has no matching funds, so it appears on our consent agenda because we will take this grant. Board members wishing to make a motion on the consent agenda. Trustee Wilson,
Move to approve the consent agenda.
supported by Treasurer DeShane. Any comments on the consent agenda this evening?
I have one comment.
Treasurer DeShane.
On page 14 of the minutes, there's a typo. Under item B, initial 2025 budget discussion, the fifth paragraph states, Treasurer Wilson asked for more clarity. That should read
So
Trustee Wilson, unless I need to have my name back, the office sign changed sometime. Otherwise, the minutes are very good.
All right, fabulous. We'll ask that
I
our
have a comment too.
Trustee Trezise, yes.
On page 4 of the minutes, page 12 of the packet, with reference to a statement I made with regard to Clovity Incorporated, which was one of the applicants to be our search firm. It says I indicated I would not support them because they did not provide an hourly rate. In fact, that's all they provided. They did not provide a summary rate, and I felt that was too much of a risk, so I would like that to be corrected.
Okay,
To say only.
Yes.
sure. So it looks like we've got 2 corrections to the minutes. Any other comments about the consent agenda? Seeing none, will the motion maker be willing to accept those as friendly amendments?
Yes, I move the consent agenda with the appropriate amendments.
Support for that.
Thank you very much. So we do need a record roll call vote for the consent agenda. Clerk Guthrie, will you please call the roll?
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee McCurtis?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
And Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 10, questions for the attorney. We have none. Item 11A is our public hearing on the 2025 township budget. We have heard from Manager Schmidt on the 2025 budget in a summary presentation earlier in the meeting this evening, and we do have a board discussion item on this topic later in the evening. However, this is the public's opportunity to weigh in on it. Similar to public comment earlier in the evening, any members of the public wishing to speak may do so at this time. We will open the public hearing at 6:47 p.m. Any members of the public wishing to speak on the 2025 township budget at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 6:47 p.m. Next on our agenda is item 12A, special use permit number 2417 Hazlitt Gallery, Inc., 2119A Hazlitt Road, recreational marijuana retailer, and we have interim manager Schmidt to give us a presentation on this topic.
Thank you. This is back in front of you for action this evening. Just to recap, the Planning Commission held the public hearing on this proposal on June 24th, had no comment from the public, and they further discussed it at July 8th and voted unanimously to recommend approval to the board. The board reviewed the requests at the August 20th meeting and raised no substantial concerns, nor was there any public comment at that time. The request is to build out an existing suite, about 1,600 square feet, at the building located at 2119 Hazlitt Road, specifically Suite A. Subject property is Zone C1, and it is within the Marijuana Business Overlay District. And this is one of the original medical marijuana licensees. They have received the appropriate recreational permit earlier this year from the board, conditionally, subject to submittal and approval of the special use permit. The special use permit was submitted in the appropriate 60-day timeframe. It has been reviewed. Staff has identified no major concerns, nor did the Planning Commission, and would recommend approval at this time. We have provided a sample motion at the bottom of page 204 of your packet for this, and a resolution on the next page, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Thank you very much. Board members, this was indeed brought before us at our last meeting for discussion. And here we have the staff's recommendation and resolution to suit based on our conversation from that meeting. Any board members wishing to make a motion or discuss this evening? Trustee Trezise.
I move to adopt the resolution approving special use permit 24-17, a request from Hazlitt Gallery Incorporated to establish a recreational marijuana retailer at 2119 Hazlitt Road, Suite A, parcel ID number 33-02-02-09-427-027. The subject property is zoned C1 Commercial, and the property is located within the Marijuana Business Overlay District.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Trezise. Do we have a support?
A second.
Supported by Trustee McCurtis. Any discussion? I'll simply point out that based on the special use criteria which we use to review such things, in my opinion, this applicant does meet all the criteria that we have requested of them, similar to other special use permits that we see. These applicants do go through a rigorous review process prior to the special use permit as well, which includes staff review, township board across several meetings to discuss licensure and approval of the licensure prior to the special use permit. And so I'm thankful that we have a very robust review process to look through these applications. And this step here is the final step in the process from the township's legislative perspective. And we'll go through the remaining reviews and approvals from the state for their licensure, and of course, all the building permits that are required as per any other development. So I'll be supporting this action item for those reasons. Any other board members? Seeing none, this does not appear to require, this must require a roll call. Clerk Guthrie, if you would, please.
Yes. Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee McCurtis?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. Next up is agenda item 12B, the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Approval. And this will be from Chief Hamill. We are required, and if we can do this while he's coming up to the podium, we are required to suspend our rules to consider this this evening. This is something that is timely. If someone would be willing to ask us to suspend our rules, that would be the time. Trustee Trezise.
I move to suspend our rules and put this on for action this evening.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wilson. Any discussion? All those in favor of suspending our rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We will suspend our rules and take this up this evening. Chief Hamill, what do you have for us?
So thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. So another grant we were graciously offered this year. Last February, March, I was in front of you with a memorandum of understanding that was approved by you between us, East Lansing, NISA, which is Williamston, and Delhi Fire Departments to write for what's called a cascade system. This is used to fill our SCBA bottles. You can see it's pretty expensive. To make it a #1 priority with the Assistance to Firefighter Grant, you had to do it as a group. If I would have just done it with Meridian, as the year before, I wouldn't have gotten it, because the only thing they really fund with their $350 million, and it's so competitive, is #1 priorities. So we were lucky to get it. So while I was off, this was presented to us. The price did go up a little bit, because it was like February when I got the quote, and it didn't go up a whole lot, which is good. But as you can see in front of you, the grant was for $60,444.80 with the matching funds of 10% of $5,494.62, of which we're not asking for any money from the general fund. Even though our cost recovery money goes to general fund, we're going to use cost recovery money, so we don't have to allocate money that's in the budget that could go for something else. So some of the money that's been brought in by the fire department this year, we'll use that for matching funds if you approve this. And you can also see that the cost went up a little bit, which we're also going to use the cost recovery money to cover. So that's really the benefit here. This is a system that we're replacing that's 25 years old. Had some mechanical issues of late, and so this is actually a really amazing benefit for us to receive this grant.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Any board members wishing to make a motion or start a discussion this evening? Trustee McCurtis.
Make a motion for the township.
Please.
Move to authorize the fire department to accept the assistance to firefighters grant for $60,440.80 and use cost recovery funds for the required matching amount of $5,494.62 and the price increase of $938.79.
Support?
Supported by Treasurer DeShane. Any discussion on this time? Trustee Trezise.
Very simply, SCBA stands for self-contained breathing apparatus.
Yes, sir.
I believe.
Yes, sir.
So that is the air that our firefighters use when entering a burning building.
Yes, sir.
And it's always nice to have a good system for filling those.
Yeah, and luckily we received a grant late last year to replace all those. So we've been doing really
Great.
well with grants, saving our budgets quite a lot of money.
Thank you. I will support this.
Thank you. Other board members, Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you. Supervisor Hendrickson, is there a reason why Meridian Township is the only one bearing the cost of the increase, the $938, or are you going to be getting some of that money back from the other
So
communities?
they don't have a need for using it. I did it because that was the only way we were going to get the grant.
Okay.
Now, it's open for them to use if they need it, if their system, so like Williamston, NISA, they have a portable unit that's on a trailer. So it's a little harder for use. East Lansing has a similar, and Delhi has a unit in-house. It's a little older, but if something happened to theirs, they can always come over. We all share things like that, but that's why.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Other board members? Yeah, this is an excellent use of time. Is going to find additional money that is coming outside the township for something that will absolutely benefit our firefighters and allow them to do their job to ensure that our residents remain safe in the most critical moments. So thank you for continuing to go out and find these grants. Certainly it makes our job a little bit easier when it comes to budget time as we find ourselves here. And so thank you.
Thank
I'll be
you.
supporting this as well. With that said, we have a roll call for this item as it does involve a small amount of money. Clerk Guthrie, will you please call the roll?
Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee McCurtis.
Yes.
Trustee Trezise.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson.
Yes.
And Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you all very much. I do appreciate it as always.
Okay, and we're back to item 13A, the 2025 Township Budget. And Mr. Schmidt has returned to us, this time for board discussion. So, board members, we have the 2025 budget in front of us, a glorious 180 pages. Would anyone like to kick off the discussion? Trustee McCurtis.
Just have a couple of questions here. I won't take up all the time, of course. In the presentation that you gave earlier, you had a list of vacancies. And I know that's kind of not a part of the budget, but bear with me. In the list of vacancies, there is a fire inspector that was vacant. What is the cost for a fire inspector, and who does it now? Do we contract it out, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's actually, it's not a vacancy, it's a new position that we would look to create. Currently, our fire marshal, Tavis Millerov, handles all the inspections. The issue is, and I think I'm not speaking out of turn when I say this is just having another body would help get to everything that it's not a new thing. We're a growing community. There's a lot of things pulling at Tavis and the fire department in general. And so, like, if there's a fire, heaven forbid, that a lot of time goes into that investigation and the work on that. And so it's just other things get left behind. Having a fire inspector on board would help us keep up on some of those inspection issues. Total cost, I don't have it in front of you. Taking all things into account, it would likely exceed $100,000.
The other question I have was just two more questions for the mayor's pension. It seems like every year there's and I know it's no fault of ours, but I was grappling with supporting or providing the fund for pension. I'm going to ask a very basic elementary question. How can we correct that?
What we're doing is, right now, is by contributing additional funds, that's what's going to correct it.
Okay.
If we weren't contributing the additional 1.5 to 2.3 million, depending on the year, dollars above our annual required contribution, it's like paying just the interest on a credit card.
I got you.
You would never get there. I mean, in theory, you would. They'll provide you the chart that shows, like, eventually you get to 100%.
Sure.
But it's just not feasible. And every community has this. These are promises that were made 20, 30, 40 years ago that we just didn't set aside enough money at the time. People are living longer. People are having more robust lives. And so when you're having people taking out of the system for longer than you originally planned for, it's naturally going to have a draw. And so what we're doing is, a lot of communities would scratch and fight us to be able to do that, because that additional money is what's getting us to the finish line quicker. Because when we get to that point where we can say we're 100% funded, our contribution will plummet. It's literally a cliff in the charts. It just drops to essentially a maintenance level payment. So we're doing what we can do. Short of being able to write a $25-ish million check tomorrow, this is what we can do.
Yeah, okay. That's it. Those are all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. You mentioned other needs for staffing, including this fire inspector. Approximately how many of those did you find to be valid requests from department heads that you really had to say no to because you're doing your best to bring us a balanced budget?
I would say probably the fire inspector, the IT tech, and whatever we're going to do with the utility building supervisor, superintendent positions. You know, I don't think anybody submitted anything this year that was out of line. I would thank the M team for not making this any more difficult than it needed to be for me this year. They didn't throw a bunch of fluff at me. They all knew it was going to be tight, and they gave me sort of the minimum they thought they needed to really make it work.
So at least 3. Did you also mention utility worker will be needed as well?
And the utility workers we're going to need to phase in, but it's coming. We originally, I think, started with 2 this year, cut it back to 1. But that will start coming as we stabilize the funds. We need more people. Just on a per mile basis, we just don't line up right now.
Okay. Other questions are about the contribution, which Trustee McCurtis mentioned, to the MERS fund, as well as the $850,000 you pulled out from last year and the $280,000 we pulled out of roads. You do show a plan that in 10 years will be caught up, but the problem I have experienced with budgets and pension estimation, there's always a 10-year plan to get there, and there's always 10 years from now, and we don't typically go into the 7th year and say we're 3 years out. Instead, that number gets reset to 10 more years, and that's what I fear we're doing here. We passed, in 2017, we put the police and fire millage before the voters, and they approved it, 1.4 mils to help us pay down the pension debt, add 2 new police officers, 2 new firefighter EMTs, as well as the new fire truck. We've made good progress, but we had hoped to be further along than we are on the pension debt by the 7th year of this, okay? And I certainly we didn't think it was going to be 17 years when we put it before the budget. Now we're saying at least 17 years. So I would suggest to the board that we have $224,040, $2,224,040 in our pension stabilization fund. I think the board, I'd like to see the board support this idea. I want to see us take the $850,000 out of that money and put it back into that money. Because this would be the first year in 8 we did not put the additional money in. And as you just pointed out, the magic sauce in getting ahead of this is additional contributions. And yeah, we're putting the 1.5 million in, which is what the voters require us to do after the 2017 police and fire millage. The additional 850 was our goodwill to the voters, saying only are we going to take the money you gave us, but we're going to find money in the general fund to pay this down as well. it was a two-pronged approach. Similarly, we did that with the road debt. Every year since the 2019 road millage got approved, we put in this extra $280,000 into the road fund. It's out of the $4 million they spend every year, it's, 5-6%. But it's again, it's an act of faith by the board to saying, we're not going to put all this on the backs of the voters of the millage. We're going to take it a little further, and we're going to find some general fund money to back up what the voters are doing to fix the roads. And if we put that additional money back in, which is about $1,100,050 or so, that still leaves us with a 44% of budget fund balance. The board requires 25%. We're at 48% with the budget proposed. If we put that $130,000 back into the roads and to the pension, we're still at a comfortable percentage with our fund balance. So I would like to hear what other board members think on this, but I'm really reluctant to pass a budget that pulls back from these commitments we've made to the voters to get the pension paid down as quickly as we can and to fix the roads as quickly as we can. We're going to be looking at having to renew the road millage in 5 years. And I think we have a stronger case to the voters. We say to them, we put every dollar into roads, and over those 10 years, we found what would be $2,800,000, which is 10 years of $280,000. We can say to the voters, we push general fund money in there as well. And the same with the police and fire millage. We're likely to need that to be extended in 2027 because we won't have it paid off by 2027. This is our act of faith with the voters to say, we found general fund money to also fund these pensions. We're with you here on trying to pay down this debt. There's two kinds of debt. There's good, on a personal level, credit card debt is bad, mortgage debt is good. At the township level, paying down the central fire station debt, that's good. MERS pension debt isn't good debt. As you pointed out, these were commitments made decades ago that we're now having to catch up and pay off. And the longer we put off paying those off, the bigger the debt gets. And these aren't exactly credit card rates, but it's the same idea. We're paying for something we already spent. And the sooner we can pay off that bad debt, the better off we're going to be. So those are my two things I'd like to hear more from the board on. But overall, I think your narrative is very good. You explained the budget well. You really brought us up to speed here. And considering you've been on the job for less than 6 months, that's most admirable. So thank you for your good presentation to the board.
Thank you.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. Agreed with those last comments. Very good presentation to the board, and thank you to you and the M team for putting it together. I wondered if you could put your presentation back up to the PASER rating page. I have a couple of questions for Deputy Manager Hofsmer. While you're going up to the podium, I too have the same concerns as Treasurer DeShane regarding the pension and the roads. And I too had a pension question, but I think Trustee McCurtis's question answered that for me. When I look at this chart, and tell me if I'm wrong, when I'm looking at it, I feel like the difference between these two numbers of where we were and where we are is increasing. Like in 2024, it's 6.24 and 5.7. In 2025, it's 6.59 and 5.87. So just wondered if you could give us a synopsis on where we are at with the roads, because I too they look great. The progress that's being made is good. I know you're working hard on it, and I appreciate that, but I know there's a long way to go, and I'm concerned about it as well. So I wondered if you could address these PASER ratings and give us a little synopsis about it.
Yep, so the two primary factors that you're seeing is, one, obviously you see the gap in year one being the 2020 construction year. And so that gap is It doubled then in 2021, right? And then it's tripling in 22. And so you're seeing that annual gap accumulate. And so that differential is growing as we go out chronologically. The other factor that we've roughly increased our PACER rating about 0.22 annually. I was looking at the spreadsheet this morning, and some years it's 0.2, some years it's 0.24, but roughly, we're on the upward trajectory by about 0.22 per year. The other factor that you're seeing in the data is that inflation that we saw from 2021 to 2022. So out of the 10 years for the millage, we only had 2 good construction seasons with unit pricing that we anticipated. So, but then from 21 to 22, the price per ton of asphalt went from, $60 to $65 to $90 to $110 per ton. So we saw that 50 to 60% increase in the price per asphalt, and therefore our mileage went down. So when we started, Mr. Perry had us doing 11 to 10 miles per year. We can still do that, but we're going to run out of funding earlier than we currently anticipate if we do that.
And how many miles are we doing now a year?
Roughly 6 miles. Cost can vary widely. Like next year's roads will be a lot more expensive, even though roughly we're doing the same mileage. And that's because we're not doing neighborhoods around the lake. This year we're doing neighborhoods around the lake. Those roads are 16 to 18 foot wide versus 28 to 32. So there's a lot less tonnage of asphalt going down.
And this millage expires in 2028?
2029.
2029.
Yep.
And how many more miles are there left to do?
It'll technically be the winter 2028 tax bill in terms of when it goes out, and we will collect it by February 14th of 2029. And restate your second question, sorry?
How many more miles are
Can we-
left to do?
Do we have left or can we do?
Do you have left to do?
Oh, miles, so I mean.
Not the rejuvenation,
Yeah, just reconstruct mileage.
The
So
reconstruct miles, not the resurface miles.
I'll give you a couple different lenses to view the problem through. So we have 153 miles of local roads. We're doing about 6 miles per year. That's a replacement cycle of replacing each road every 25 to 30 years. So, I mean, that's actually a very sustainable program based on current construction costs. In terms of like the immediate, right, like the immediate lens of how do we get all the roads up to an 8? Let's talk for a brief second about what it means to have an average PACER rating of an 8. That means for every 10 you have, for every mile of 10, meaning a road that we just reconstructed within the last 3 years, you have that many miles of 6s, and you have nothing below a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale, when the city of Lansing is averaging like a 2.7, right? And there's not a community in the state really that has, an exceptional local road PACER rating or pavement rating, just because there is no funding for local roads unless you pass a really, really robust millage at the local level. In terms of where we're going to get to by the end of this year, we have 6 more miles in 25, and we're probably going to get it depends on which roads we select, but we will have enough to do another 6 next year, and then about 13 to 14 miles the 2 following years.
So we have 153 miles, and how many have been done? Of
That was
the
in the numbers that I
153,
just
how
gave
many are?
Director Schmidt, and I want to say that the number I gave him was about 41 or 42 miles that we have done to date. And we're gonna have another 20 miles after this year.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're gonna get through, at the end of the program, I think we're gonna be in the ballpark of 50 to 60 miles, certainly over 50, on just reconstructs, just the roads that we fully reconstructed, meaning we removed all existing HMA and paved a brand-new road.
And the PACER rating goal is 8, is that correct, from what I remember?
That was the goal, but we've known since, February of '22, when we got our bids in, that was not going to be attainable.
So I have, thank you. I have the same concern with the roads that I have with the pension. I mean, the prices are only going to increase. We're going to be decreasing the amount of miles that we can do because of the increased cost of product. I'm also concerned about the pension and, you know, I have discussions with my brother all the time about making extra mortgage payments. You need to make an extra mortgage payment to decrease your percentage that you owe in the end and decrease, you know, the length of time that you're spending on this thing. So, you know, that's something I think that is prudent. And I think that's something that like Treasurer DeShane said, we have an over percentage amount in our fund balance. And I agree with Treasurer DeShane that we could add money towards these two items. I hadn't thought about that until I saw the presentation, so I appreciate the presentation. It really pointed that out to me more than before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have other questions as well.
Please, no, go ahead.
No, I'll wait on those.
Yeah, so since we're on the topic of the pension stabilization fund and pension versus road funding, I had a similar but slightly less ambitious idea myself. We have, when we originally set aside the pension stabilization fund, we did so that we would be ready in times of crisis to step in if we couldn't meet some of our minimum obligations. We have, through sound investing, and thank you for Treasurer DeShane and our finance director for making sure that we are invested in high yield accounts. We have raised somewhere in the ballpark of $225,000 simply in interest since the establishment of that fund. And so my thought was not to dip too far into it because I do think it's wise to retain that rainy day fund in case things get truly bad. To instead of pulling $850,000 out, to instead pull the $225,000 in interest that we've accrued over the last few years, and add that as an additional payment to the pension to the MERS pension contribution. This is basically money that we've had just by having money, and it's, it allows us to continue to grow. And if we leave this in these interest-bearing accounts, then we'll have this money, and you'll have similar interest accrual in the future. If we dip so far down, it's going to take quite a while to get back up to us, right? It's just how interest works. You get interest on the bigger number, there's more interest coming in. So my recommendation would be to leave as much as we can. We decided that 1.2 million was the amount we wanted in there. Dip the interest off the top and put that toward the pensions this year. And it doesn't make up for the full $850,000 that we pulled from the general fund. But it is showing that, even when we have a tight general fund budget, we have other avenues and we can get creative and continue to make donations, even if it wasn't to that same level to our pension fund. I think, with regard to the road money, we have a funding source for this, right? And I understand that we have traditionally put money out of the general fund into that. And that may have even extended, I think, whoever's our historian here, might have extended prior to the millage even, when the county was only putting in $100,000 toward road. I think we were putting money out of the general fund for it at that time. So that even predated the millage. This board has made significant investment into our roads from other funding mechanisms outside of the road millage as well. We put north of $2 million of our ARP money already into our local road program. We've made a significant investment into that. I mean, if you were counting how much of the, how many that would be 9 years of our general fund contribution made all at once in that one ARP decision. And so I believe that, we have shown that, in fact, we do have, our interest in seeing this and making that contribution. We've done a lot already to put money toward the roads. This is, the road millage is one that is not going to be a one and done. We get our roads up to an 8 and on this first 10 years. It's going to be a longer program than that. We've got a lot of miles of road. The prices have gone up. And yes, we are certainly willing to make a lot of contributions into this. And I think we have done that, certainly in my time on the board. I don't know that dipping into the pension stabilization fund or the general fund would be an appropriate use for the road money at this time, given the investment that we've already made into it. That's above and beyond what we had intended even when the program started. So I would be certainly happy to support pulling some money off of the pension stabilization fund to put toward additional payments toward the pensions. I don't know that 850, I don't know that I would do that personally. Trustee Wilson.
Director Schmidt, Interim Manager Schmidt.
I respond to anything.
You'll answer to anything. Did you do the analysis of the ARPA funds that are remaining?
We have currently in the budget, they are parked in a line item for, I believe, roads. We put them in just to have them in there. Conversation was still going to happen after our last meeting as to exactly how to direct those funds. Functionally, we're at roughly the same place we were before. It is somewhere around it's $260,000 for the affordable housing initiatives that's not going to get used. There's a portion of the software for community planning and development that's not going to get used. And then how we allocate these senior and community center funds, given the timing that we're under. So what we're going to do is the plan is from a staff's perspective, once we get budget finalized, is to go back and reanalyze that, figure out what our timing constraints are and where that best makes sense within those timing constraints, because I know the generator came up, paying for the generator, there was some concern as to whether or not we could meet the deadlines under the ARPA funding for that. And so we're going to analyze those deadlines and then bring back a recommendation. Certainly, if the board wants to simply allocate the rest of the funds to the local road program, we can move on and be done with it, or some other thing that we've already lined up. But we were planning on bringing back a conversation after the budget for that.
Okay. Do you think it's north of $200,000?
It is. I know that it's north of $200,000.
So I share the concerns of other board members and the treasurer that I did not like to see the $280,000 contribution come off the roads this year. I do think we should try to find a funding source for that. And so my immediate capital improvement project analysis looked at updating the municipal bathrooms for $320,000. Are there mechanical issues associated with those bathrooms?
Not that I'm aware of, but that we'll need to make sure of that as we go. But I think the issue we may have with that as well is simply getting it done in time. But we can certainly look into the timing on that as well.
Done in time for?
Under the having the money under contract.
Oh, no, it's not ARPA. Is it ARPA?
If we were going to convert it to ARPA.
If.
If, yes.
Okay. I think between the ARPA funds and this renovation, proposed renovation, which I would suggest we might want to defer into 2026 if we do not have mechanical issues, because those restrooms, which we use, are functioning and would work, and we could get through this year. And I was going to suggest that we do a conversion of the funds that we would spend on those bathrooms to fund the $280,000 for the roads, that contribution that we've been historically making up until this year. I would really like to see that. I have some other topics, but
Yeah, let's
Let's
clear
finish
this one
this
out
one.
first, if we can. Any other board members on that? Clerk Upton?
Thank you. I would concur with the proposed amounts from Supervisor Hendrickson for the pension and Trustee Wilson for reallocating the funds from the bathrooms, which I believe have been done within the last 10 years from looking at. Sam, have you been here that long since the bathrooms have been running? I'm trying to find.
We're done in the last 10 years, but depends when it's.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I would concur with both of those recommendations for funding.
Thank you. So we're talking about, it sounds like there's two proposals for pension, one at 850 out of the pension stabilization fund, one at 224,000 out of the pension stabilization fund, and then reallocating the 320,000 of the bathroom renovation project from the capital project fund into whatever the $250,000, is it?
280 for the roads.
280
For the roads.
for the local road program.
And perhaps the difference could go toward the pension stabilization. I just think there's a way to.
Well, so it's existing funds in the capital projects fund, so we would just, the difference would just stay in the capital projects fund at this point.
Yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have to allocate it. Do we have general consensus or agreement on that approach? How do we feel about that, Trustee
I would
Trezor?
agree with that approach.
Okay.
To contribute to both the numbers that we were discussing, or you've just been discussing, and go forward on that basis.
I
like that.
Oh, so, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I like that as well.
Treasurer DeShane, can you be okay with that?
On the road or the pension issue?
Both.
Both.
I don't think that's enough to contribute to the pension. We have $14.5 million in our reserve accounts. If you want to take the interest from all of those funds that our current rates are around 4%, you come up with a figure around just shy of $600,000. So if you want to make a contribution of interest, I would make it a real one. I mean, $200,000 to the pension, to me, is just lip service. If we're going to put money into it, we should put real money into it. And to me, the $2.24 million we've got in the pension stabilization fund is exactly for making up the shortfall. Because this is the commitment this board has made for 7 consecutive years. We set up a pension stabilization fund for tight years. I really believe we ought to put all $850,000 back into that. We've got a big debt, and it's not getting any better. And to be sitting on $14.5 million in reserve funds and not making the contribution we made the previous 7 years, it's like having a savings account over here and then paying huge interest rates on your credit cards. It makes sense to pay it on the credit cards, taking the money out of your savings account. I really don't support anything less than $850,000 for it. We've made this, again, this is kind of a good faith agreement with the voters when we passed the police and fire millage in 2017. And I think we ought to stay with it, certainly for the first 10 years until the millage runs out, and see where we're at with our MERS liability.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
I would like to see us come to some kind of a compromise when it comes to this, because I do share Supervisor Hendrickson's concerns that this is our rainy day fund. If we have an economic downturn that is as severe as 2008, for instance, we're going to be looking to be able to make our minimum payments into the pension fund. And that's why there is this reserve there. But I do understand that you are saying that we do have $14 million in our reserves. So I think there's maybe some room that we could talk about to come somewhere between the $225,000, which is interest only, and the $850,000, which I think is a bit more than we can afford to do at this time.
So splitting the difference puts us at about $500K.
537 is actually exactly half. I was assuming the question.
Our interim manager has decided that compromise is indeed the better part of valor. Trustee McCurtis, you had your hand up?
I was going to say, can we split it down the middle? And you already said it.
Terrific. Well, Treasurer DeShane, I understand that you're adamant about 850, but 537 is 300 more than you had just moments ago.
300 more than your cheapskate number, but yeah.
Compromise.
I understand.
Compromise is good.
This board needs to act as a whole and speak with one voice. I'm not happy about it, but I can live with the 537.
All right.
Great.
And I heard no disagreement on the bathroom renovation coming off and using that for the road funding. Are we comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that as well.
Terrific. Those are some two concrete directions. Look at that. We can make progress here. Okay. That was item number 1.
Oh, gosh.
I have 1,000 notes, but I will hand things off to someone else, and hopefully some of mine get taken before it gets back to me. Anyone else wish to make comments?
Water.
Yes. Trustee Wilson, on the water and sewer, I presume.
Yes, I recognize how serious our situation is here because there's been deferred maintenance for way longer than any of us have been sitting up here. And I know that we have to bite the bullet and start addressing that. That makes absolute sense. What concerns me, the primary thing, I can live with the water rate increase, but the ready-to-serve portion, where we had a 0 fee 2 years ago and went to a $12, this is what all taxpayers pay, and then went to a $12 fee, and now we're going to a minimum $24 fee with the sliding scale, which I 100% agree with. But that now is a 200% increase for our taxpayers in terms of the just getting the water bill, which they get every 2 months. Is that correct, Treasurer Shane?
They get it every 3 months.
3 months.
Quarterly,
Okay, so,
they get quarterly bills,
okay,
except for our commercial accounts that are billed more frequently.
okay. So 4 times that, we have to factor in, I think it's a big bite to swallow. I'd like to see us do, again, some kind of compromise on that ready-to-serve fee. That was, to me, the most egregious portion of what we took a look at. Go ahead.
So I'll give everyone just some food for thought to start. Our ready-to-serve fee began in it began when Mr. Perry was here, but we were not at 0. We did not just create a ready-to-serve fee in the last 2 years. However, in the 2022 budget, the 2023 budget, which we put together in 2022, we did increase it from $5 to $12. So we did more than double it.
Okay.
But what I would note, even with what's before you tonight, which would be to double it from $12 to $24, we are 233% to 913% below every other system in this region for that portion, the fixed ready-to-serve fee portion of the bill. We have that all compiled in spreadsheets, and that's what we shared with the supervisor. And there were 2 trains of thought. We can just increase the consumption fees considerably this time. What I would advise is that the ready-to-serve fee often gets confused with a billing fee. And so when you increase that, people think even though we have a little asterisk on it on our bill and we have there's not a lot of space left on a water bill to put word count, But we do have a brief explanation to try to convey what that is for, but nevertheless, people will kind of have a visceral reaction. And so if you're going to increase it, knowing that we are woefully below all of our other systems in the region, again, 233% to 913, if you touch it, you want to make it count, because there's going to be a lot of employee hours that get spent just explaining that fee to residents. So it's kind of one of those, when you touch it, make it worth our while, and then don't touch it for a while. So like next year, I would probably not recommend anything in that area and just recommend increasing the consumption rates. But even with the BWL, if we can go to that chart, like the BWL is doing 9.5% increases for 3 consecutive years, and they're way above us. We don't have them broken out, but Bath Township is BWL for water, for instance, and so is Delta Township and Delhi Township. So even with them having significantly higher rates than we do, they're doing 9.5% increases over the next 3 years. So it's one of those, the ready to serve fee is just a tricky one, because it upsets people, but really it's a fairness factor, because just because someone only consumes, let's say it's, a single person living in a home by themselves, even though they're only consuming 4,000 gallons, that doesn't make the water main in front of their home any less expensive to replace. It's still $270 per linear foot. It doesn't make the lift station that pumps their raw waste uphill any cheaper to replace. It doesn't make the water tower any cheaper to replace, or the water treatment plant, or the water plant. And that's kind of where it just gets difficult. We need a ready-to-serve fee that is significant, because there is a significant cost to replacing the system, regardless of how many gallons one consumes through that infrastructure.
So you think it's a better approach, rather than scaling it in at, say, $18 this year and $24 next year, is to just give the 100% increase?
I think it's better to go big and then give a year or two of grace and then come back at it. But again, we do have a problem here where we really should have had a more deliberative conversation in the late 90s.
Yeah.
When you look at development patterns, yes, we're still growing at 10, 11% on population on the census tracts, but our real growth, the substantive growth, was the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then we kind of got the boards of no growth or planned growth, right? And things have just changed. And we didn't have that conversation back at that time, and now kind of we're suffering from that. But we can't continue to operate. We don't have a magic bullet, and we don't know something that all these other water systems across the region do know or don't know. We don't have a magic bullet that they don't know about. There is a cost to maintaining the infrastructure long term, and even having a slightly younger system than most of them doesn't mean that we don't have some of our own failings. We have 31 lift stations, East Lansing has 2. So we may not have some of the issues that they're dealing with in terms of lead service lines or things like that, but we have way more water meters because they have a lot of apartment buildings, and so those typically only have 1 meter on them. So like when it comes time to replace water meters every 20 years, we bear a lot more cost because we have 15,000 to their 9,000. Lift stations, they were built out kind of systematically, whereas we were built out in phases. And so we weren't always able to plan for having fall in the sanitary system. So then therefore we have to have pumps where we don't have fall anymore. We got to pump it uphill so that it can fall back downhill using gravity. But we have a lot more pumping stations than the city. And so it's just one of those things where it's the conversation probably should have been had 2 decades ago, and we're having it now.
Yeah.
And we're kind of left holding the bag, and it's a difficult one, but it's one that we'll explain to our residents with patience. I just think with the ready to serve fee, if we do it, we should do it significantly, and then not give people a year or two off on the ready-to-serve fee.
If you go to this higher fee at $24 per household minimum, will you be able to do the Grand River Gates valve project?
I think so, and we were talking, the supervisor and I were talking a little bit before this about, we could even look at the ARPA funding for that as well, because that is a project that we have the RFP done. We did put it out to bid in the middle of the summer of '23, and we only had one bidder. So that's one where we felt if we took our time, put it back out to bid at a more ideal cycle in the season, when the contractors aren't as busy, we might get bids that are actually lower. So I think with this revenue and maybe with a little help from the ARPA funds, yeah, we could put that out.
I just think we're showing that it's a benefit to the entire system. It's a little easier to sell such an increase.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's my water comment. I got more.
Further to Shane.
On the water issue, our office is adjacent to utility billing, and I think the utility billing people in our township are the toughest jobs in the township. They get calls all day from residents upset about their water bill, consumption, whatever it is. And people think that their water bill is negotiable, but their taxes they got to pay, but they can negotiate their water bill. And of course, they can't. But so having to have this discussion about ready-to-serve fee 1 year rather than consecutive years, I support that. I think the salient thing about this chart is East Lansing rates are 76% higher than ours. We co-own the water plant with them, correct?
Yes, and the WRF, where our wastewater goes.
Yeah, so for those two plants, we have the same costs.
Correct, essentially.
And you're telling me we have 20 more lift stations than they do, and they have fewer meters than we do. So clearly, sometimes, don't know this for a fact, but I think some communities might use their water and sewer fees as a revenue source outside of water and sewer. Clearly, we're not. We're just trying to pay for the cost of it. But using the same plants, infrastructure, where our rates are significantly lower than East Lansing, that's, to me, speaks volumes about us trying to keep these rates as low as we can in comparison to other communities, particularly one that uses the same water and sewer plant that we do.
Yep. In East Lansing, I mean, they had to decombine their stormwater and sanitary sewer systems, portions of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's one of their extraordinary costs, but just because our system's newer doesn't make us immune from having some areas of extraordinary cost.
Thank you. Other board members? Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. I too wanted to comment about the water and sewer funds. I feel as if I've been working at this township since 1996, and I feel that every board meeting I've ever watched, every budget discussion is about Meridian Township having lower water and sewer rates, and that we are going to create a program to increase it. And so my hope is I guess this really isn't a question, more of a comment, is that I'm disappointed too, and I hate to say this because I have to pay water and sewer just like everybody else, but it is disappointing to look at this chart, and I feel like all of the discussions I've ever heard about it since I've been at the township hasn't really moved a whole lot in comparison to how many times it's been talked about how much lower we are than everyone else. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard interim manager Schmidt say that you were going to be coming up with a gradual water and sewer rate increase program.
So one of the items that the board asked us to look into when we originally brought forward our budget discussions was the idea of pegging a certain percentage of automatic increase to inflation so that there's at least some growth in the system. Because I think, to your point, part of the reason we're not really catching up is because everyone else is increasing their rates too, because they have needs that they need to fund. Mm-hmm. And so if we do a 5% increase this year, I mean, you can look on the chart and see, if you compare that to the increases that are being proposed that we're aware of around the region, we would fall further behind at that point. So, functionally, that's part of the reason we've never really clawed back, because any modest increase we ever had was dwarfed by some of the large increases the other communities are seeing. But to the question, yes, the board has asked us to look into a couple of different policies of how we address these on a more systematic basis going forward, and we are in the process of doing that. One is tying it to inflation. The other was looking at, it's written on my whiteboard and I can't remember what it says now, but there were two different policies that we'll be looking at to bring forward to address this.
Thank you. I had some thoughts on this, obviously, as well. And, yeah, we're making up for a historic underfunding. At least we're starting to.
Absolutely.
With this, boards decades ago have talked around it. And it falls to us to, do a difficult thing here, which is passing along rate increases. But it's something that we have to do. Our infrastructure is aging. We have major projects on the horizon. I mean, I'm looking at the CIP for the near future, and I'm going to struggle to pull it up now. In the 2026 budget, which is, all of us 1 year from now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 to 8 major water projects that are, I didn't add them up, but just looking at the totals here, it's looking in the ballpark of $1 million to $1.5 million just in 2026. This is, we're approaching crisis level of underfunding here. And the last 2 years, we have seen the water fund balance decrease. We've been running a deficit at the water fund, and we have to do something. We have to act. I would ask, I'm not going to ask us to change what was proposed. However, I would ask that, we consider whether or not we need to bring in an outside third party to really do a deep dive analysis of our water and sewer rates and how we address them year over year. I think having someone who's done this across many different communities, I think would be helpful, and would allow us to plan out, this is very helpful, right? The percentage difference between, regions, but really what I would like to see is, let's chart out the next, 25 years of what we know is coming from a water replacement and sewer replacement, and set our rates accordingly. I think certainly the inflationary component is something we should do. It's something that we should have been doing this whole time, simply because things get more expensive. And the fact of the matter is that our water rates haven't. And so we should at least look at the inflationary component in the very short term. I also think there are some interesting and maybe creative ways that we can address usage. Usage by type, right? Commercial businesses are operating only a couple hours a day, 8 hours a day, compared to homes which are occupied all the time. Yet they pay the same rates and their pipes cost exactly as much as by differing by type. Maybe we consider whether or not there's a different way we charge commercial meters versus residential meters, something to that effect. Perhaps if we do go forward with some kind of a study out there, they would be able to tell us if anyone in the state is doing something like that. Just, think outside the box, think creatively. It's one thing to say, well, we've got the lowest rates in the county. But, is there a way we can do it smarter, right? Is there a way we can do it? We can be leaders on this, not only just because our rates are lower than everyone else's, but also because maybe we find a magic bullet. You never know. Stranger things have happened. But I appreciate you bringing this to us. Ours is to make the difficult decisions here, and be answerable to them. And so we must. But let's make a commitment that we're going to, look at this, from a professional standpoint and see if there's a way to address the longer ranging problems so that we don't have to have jarring increases every so often.
Absolutely, point well taken, and I think that there's a few things floating around in my head already, so we've got some work out of us.
Thank you. Other board members on this topic? All right, moving on. Anyone else got other items to bring up? Trustee Wilson? I see more sticky notes.
Yeah, more sticky notes. I would like to see in our budget, under economic development, there was a line called miscellaneous for $10,000 a year. I'd like a better explanation of what is miscellaneous for $10,000. I didn't see that anywhere else in the budget. That was a concern. I'm curious about the $100,000 that is the set aside in Parks and Rec to do a study of, go ahead, Dante, if you want to.
Yeah, the $10,000 in miscellaneous for the EDC is, I think, partially for reimbursement for bond issuance costs at Bertram Hills. So that's what that $10,000 line item is.
Could we be more specific then in the line item?
I can adjust it. I think that's the way it was listed last year, so I got to continue to forward from the way it was listed previously.
I got you.
I can change the description.
Yeah, I just think it's too vague. Yeah. I'd just like to see what that actually is.
No, and I actually, it's funny, we've had this conversation, I've had this conversation with Deputy Manager Osmer as well. I think one of the things we're gonna try and do in the upcoming year is kind of clarify and consolidate some of our line items, because in some of the departments, they definitely have a couple of different things that say the same thing. Chief Grillo and I ran into this trying to figure out where to put the tasers, actually. So I think we need to clarify some things in general within our budget. That's a good point, though.
Great. I agree with a lot of the other changes that you're making in terms of liquor license costs, cemetery-related fees. That seems to go up $100 a year every year. The rental fee, inspection, and so on, I think that's a great idea. And missed appointments, because I know that is a factor, and that should be done.
It's driving us crazy right now.
I'm sure it is, because I observed that. I wanted to know, and I do like the parking ticket fines. It's about time we did something like that. And Chief Grillo, you came up with that, correct?
Did we not have fines for parking?
Never had.
Yes, ma'am. Those were a long time coming. We bought about 40,000 copies of parking tickets back in the 1900s that are still in use today. They look terrible. We have to cross out the fines, and honestly, we didn't have a proper schedule, so that was a long time coming, yes, ma'am.
They're all reasonable things. Don't park next to a fire hydrant, that kind of thing. So
Yes, ma'am.
I thought that was great. Under the Parks and Recreation budget, I was surprised to see that a study might cost $100,000. That seemed excessive to me. Just to study cricket as.
Is that the, yeah.
It is cricket, yep.
Yeah, it's cricket. What did I say?
Just a study.
Sorry. The study for cricket.
Yeah, good evening, Courtney, Parks and Rec Director. So it would not be a study, it's an assessment of a feasibility. So we have both the park, we have a very large cricket community, I know you know, Trustee Wilson. And our park commission has tasked us with finding a permanent space for the cricket field. After a lot of discussion with our cricket community and some research on what it takes, it's an exceptionally large field. Think about the size of a soccer or football field. And to do that, we have to, we would plan to hire an engineering company, identify some sites that could possibly accommodate that size, and then do, an engineering study to see if it's even feasible. There's a lot of things to consider, not just the field itself, but also parking, amenities. This is a family-style sport, so it's going to require quite a bit of thinking on picnicking and other amenities that people might need in an area that's not existing park, mode park area. So it's really, study's probably not the best word for it, but more of an assessment of feasibility. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the cost of what we spent to do all the work on the community center, and I think we're in the neighborhood of 70,000, and that was very extensive work. So I was thinking that 100,000 seemed too high.
A little high, okay.
So maybe that could be revised.
Sure.
And have a little savings on that.
Yeah.
Courtney, while you're up here, could we talk about the additional work that we need to do at Marshall Park? Because we just spent $150,000 there.
Yep, I'm gonna write this down one moment.
Yeah, sure.
And Trustee Wilson did, well, Supervisor Hendrickson can confirm what you think a good cost to begin a engineering feasibility assessment. You're thinking,
You want to get it all done in 2025 so that you're ready, shovel ready?
that would be ideal.
Oh, I can't guess. I don't know. I think it's got to be an up to, but I think there probably is some wiggle room there that we can recover.
Okay.
A portion of that 100,000. I just think you can do it.
Okay, I care less. Yeah.
So I think maybe what we can do here is, certainly the board has final, and the Parks Commission, and have final say on the contract. And so I think, knowing this, I think my recommendation would be to let's go out to RFP it and see what our numbers come back at, knowing that we don't want to spend that level. And that way, both Parks and the Township Board can review it and have a conversation, probably jointly, about what their level looks like of commitment to this next year.
Okay.
So it wouldn't, if we just leave it at 100,000 now, that way it's there, it is what it is, but knowing that there's going to be a further conversation about this at both boards, it won't be spent until we get to that place.
Thank you, Manager Schmidt.
Thank you.
Second question.
Marshall Park.
Next ideas for Marshall Park. So Marshall Park was originally on our capital improvement plan, our CIP for 2026. So we pushed it up. At that time, we had additional funding to look at some of the other amenities there. In the prior to the structure being constructed, we did a community survey of folks within a general area. Our communications team did that for us, and with that, we had about 50 respondents, and of those respondents, we asked what they would like to see in that park. And so looking at that, some of the other amenities that were pretty, it was pretty high consensus was native planting, help reduce with the water that sits in that area, so both those are kind of coincide. Additional walking paths, a lot of people use it for walking. Then also additional picnic areas and shade areas as a result of the play structure. People love it, but whenever I go out there, it is really hot if you're in the middle of the day. So looking at additional picnic and shade, but also the parking lot, we're going to resurface. The basketball court is well used and yet is in really poor condition. So we'll look at doing that as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you tell me a little bit more about the inclusive playground at Towner Park at $300,000? That to me is more of a want than a need. And I'm a little concerned at its placement way out at the edge of the township, because you really have to drive there. I don't know that any neighborhood other than the new, you know what I'm talking about, the new apartment area is really the only walkable in those single-family homes up there off of Saginaw.
Absolutely. So the Towner Road inclusive play was included in the CIP. So I took that $300,000 that was included in the CIP and just, that's what we put in for the budget this year. I can talk to the inclusive play at Marshall Park.
Right.
It was appropriated $150,000 by the board. Thank you very much. But it ended up costing us about $165,000. So that size of a playground, just have that in mind. Pretty large, pretty inclusive. At Towner Road, not a lot of walking traffic, but Towner Road Park is highly used. The parking lot is there's never enough parking. We've got pickleball, you've got basketball, you've got all kinds of sports happening there. That's the intent of that particular park. So the need is for those little sibs, something for those little sibs to do while the others are playing or while people are playing pickleball. So the inclusive type of playgrounds are much more expensive. Does it have to, do we have to spend up to $300,000? I'll take the direction of the board for sure. We could do something similar where we put it out to bid, decide what we want, and then see what those prices might come in and come back to the board with that.
Okay, again, I think it's a significant amount of money in the budget, and I think maybe we should evaluate what really wants to be there, what you want to be there.
Sorry, before we jump on, we have been letting others weigh in on the various areas we've been talking about. Do any board members wish to comment on any of the parks items that have been discussed thus far? I don't see any raising hands. My only question about one of them was the cricket study. Are you looking to put this somewhere where nothing exists currently? Are you looking to use existing park facilities and transform? What's the hope?
It's tricky, Supervisor. So it would be ideal if we could use an existing park. It's already there, it's already flat, we've already got amenities. But our parks, our fields are well overused. And we're working with Okemos Public Schools during their construction. We're having to manipulate some parks too. So what happens is you overuse a park and then your turf does not have time to rest. So we're still looking at both whether it be an existing field or if it be a new facility. In talks with the Park Commission, we'll likely choose an existing field to put in a temporary pitch while we work on this longer term plan. Based on we've given it a lot of thought, we just don't have the space that will accommodate cricket that starts in April, doesn't get done until late October every day and every weekend with our existing facilities. So I do believe we'll have to end up with a long-term new facility in an existing park.
Sure. That's terrific. There's so much interest in every day for 6 months that's a lot, but that's good that there's that much excitement about it.
It is, and Trustee Wilson and I were fortunate enough to attend a meeting, and this is, cricket is men's leagues, women's leagues, kids' leagues, intramural leagues. It was an entire day of celebrating cricket amongst just in Michigan. So it's a very large community, and we're really missing that component here in mid-Michigan.
Got it. Trustee McCurris and then Treasurer DeShane.
Two questions. In terms of cricket, and I understand there's a lot of popularity. Are we talking our residents here in Meridian Township or, mid-Michigan? And the second question is, are we looking, this place happens and it comes to fruition and it's a permanent spot. Are we looking at leagues where we offer it just like we do flag football and basketball and that sort of thing too? Or is it just for leisure or both?
Good questions. First question, with regards to residents, it would mostly be Meridian residents that are looking for an area to play, mostly to practice for leagues. So there's already leagues across Michigan, and I'm not an expert on this. This is based on what I've kind of heard and talked with the community about. But there's leagues across Michigan. Meridian or Central Michigan has several leagues. Many of them live in Meridian. Closest cricket field we have is Delta Township. The other cricket fields are either in Southeast Michigan or on the west side in the Grand Rapids area. There's nothing in between, so they're traveling every weekend back and forth across the state. and nowhere to actually practice outside of what we've seen in like, old baseball fields or things like that, but nothing formal outside of Delta. And when talking to the community, even Delta, which is much closer than Grand Rapids or let's say Birmingham, it's still, if you're practicing every day and you have a family and you're working, it's really hard to make that trek back and forth every day. And it's a committed community when it comes to the cricket community. That was your first question. Second question about leagues. That would be something Parks and Rec as a department would work with the community on. We have multiple, it's variable depending on the sport, on who runs those leagues. So for example, pickleball, we don't run leagues, but there's people that manage those courts that help run leagues within there. We work together, but it doesn't directly come out of our department. I would expect something of a hybrid be similar with cricket, where these leagues are already established. So we just want to be supportive on how do we get you the amenities you need to make it possible. There was a third question?
No, that was it.
That was it, okay.
Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
I fully support exploring this cricket opportunity. I think cricket's where soccer was 50 years ago, and it's taking this direction, I think, is really a good move towards diversity and inclusion, because it's not a native sport to the United States, but there certainly is to a very significant Indian population here, and providing a sport that they are very enthusiastic about and practice at and want to play here is great. It seems to me that Nancy Moore Park would be a great location. I've been by there, jogging through there on a Sunday morning, and there was a cricket match going on. So are they using that as a temporary pitch sometimes?
I don't know of any temporary pitch. So a temporary pitch is an actual structure that can be removed and moved back. So they're likely using those facilities because they use as many as they can around. In looking at planning for 2025, I'm going to look at these fields a lot closer, especially given our coordination with Okemos Public Schools and how we have to kind of accommodate that for the next several years while we get new facilities there, because we do share all of our facilities. So in speaking with my rec specialists, Nancy Moore is pretty, it also houses a tremendous amount of sports. So again, letting the fields rest. So to have something that's consistent, we need to have somewhere that isn't being played by football, by soccer, by baseball, things like that. But I could certainly look into that a little further, Treasurer.
It seems that area north of the loop there, before the railroad tracks, is a big open field right now, and that's where they were playing.
Yeah, that's our football and our soccer fields.
Okay.
But I will look into the scheduling component of that, for sure.
Okay.
Something temporary, thinking long-term.
Long-term.
All right. Thank you very much. Other discussion points? I've got a few. They're organized by page, if that's okay. Ari, the motor pool. I appreciate that we're making some changes to how that's funded so that we can ensure the ongoing solvency of that fund. I do want to point out, I've made a similar comment at several budgets now. I would like us to begin to explore the transition to electric vehicles throughout our fleet. I understand that technology has come a long way, and specifically that those vehicles that may not have been available in EV are now becoming available, specifically police cruisers. And so obviously not something we're going to poke at this year. However, I do want to go on record saying that this is, I think, a long-term goal that we should pursue, and hopefully get further study on the books for, as we prepare for our 2026 budget and look at whether we can begin that transition. Page 40 in our budget is relating to assessing, I believe. Yes. So in 2023, we paid $860 in outside services. In '24, we budgeted and paid $28,500, and in 2025, we're looking to spend $40,000. And the only explanation it says is for outside appraisals and expert witnesses. Are we going to court that much more?
This is quite literally, this is we hope we don't have to spend it. We have a number of additional appeals that have slowly trickled in this year. Nothing that we're too worried about, but to Assessor Winstead's credit, they're not easy ones as a general rule, that when we get to the point of needing an appraisal and needing an expert witness. And so this is just, if we needed it, this is where we go. I don't anticipate, based on my current understanding, that this year will require any additional funding. This is essentially next year, assuming that we end up with one more appeal than we had this year that goes that far, right? We kind of always assume one or two are gonna really push for a while. This is assuming 3, just because we got a couple extra appeals late in the year. We're just trying to be safe here. I don't anticipate we'll spend it, but that's the story behind that line item.
Thank you. On page 42, clerk, elections, an area of interest for me. So we have budgeted 0 in 2025. I have found, in my experience, that there is almost never a year when we have 0 elections. The county will undoubtedly try to put something on, or if they don't, a school district will undoubtedly try to put something on. Do we believe it's wise to budget 0?
I certainly can increase, we can certainly look back historically and find a year of comparison that would give us a number to include for personnel costs there.
I would urge us to consider that, Clerk Guthrie. You may have more to weigh in on in this regard, since this is indeed your day job. But it jumped out at me, given that 2023 was also not an even year, election year, and yet we had $82,000 in expenses then as well. And to reduce it down makes me worried that this is an area that we will find ourselves with a lot of chagrin if we pass this with 0. But Clerk Guthrie, perhaps you can weigh in on that.
I agree. Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. It was on my list, and I've crossed it off my list of questions. I think maybe 2023 personnel costs is a good measure, and I would keep that 5,000, but I think the operating costs and personnel costs from 2023 in an odd year I did speak to the schools, and they did state that they don't have something for next year. So I did ask prior to meeting with Director Ianni about this. But you are right. The county could have something come up. The township could have something come up. And so I think it would be prudent to add some of those numbers back in. And 2023, those 2 personnel and operating costs are probably a good gauge.
Absolutely.
If we can do that, if you please.
I think I can make it happen.
On page 73 and 74 of the budget, sorry, I don't know where that is in the packet, but we are talking about pedestrian bicycle pathway and millage fund. So it was stated earlier in this document that we had phase 3 of the Lake Lansing, MSU to Lake Lansing pathway funded fully through grant funding. And maybe this is just me not reading this correctly, but I believe that this shows an incoming of $2 million in reimbursements other, and an outgoing of $2.7 million in capital, which I think, if I'm reading this correctly, is indeed the phase 3 of Lake Lansing. Is that accurate, or am I reading that wrong?
So accurate to a point. So what you're seeing is the grant that we received from, and technically it's a reimbursement grant, so we don't have those funds in hand. We will get them as soon as we are constructing it. We do have our initial deposit. I think it's 33% is what they give us initially. But our grant from the Ingham County Trails and Parks millage was $2.025 million. Our match was 10% on that total. And then we also typically do about $400,000 in small gap projects and just preventative maintenance, getting rid of trip hazards and other things. So that gap that you're referring to is approximately $400,000, and that would just be our normal maintenance on the system that year.
Okay, so the Lake Lansing pathway, the MSU to Lake Lansing pathway is not actually 100% grant funded.
No.
It's 70% grant funded or thereabouts.
90-10.
90-10.
Yep. The township put up 10% from the pathway millage. We get points on the point scoring for just achieving a 10% match on the county Trails and Parks millage scoring criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
So on page 79, we're talking about the police restricted designated fund. Capital items show iPad for each individual officer for use in the field, but budgeted amount shows 0.
So that was done, that was drug forfeiture funds, correct? Yeah, that was drug forfeiture funds, and so that was a one-time expense that we had drug forfeiture funds come in and we spent them on iPads. It was
Had previous?
correct? Yeah.
Okay. All right, so then perhaps we just have an antiquated description in the capital items, because that's listed specifically in the capital items.
Oh,
on
that,
page.
you caught a carryover typo from last year. That was a 24 expenditure was the iPads.
Okay.
That should be struck from the 25 budget.
Fabulous. Page 81, Community Needs Fund. I have concerns about the rate at which they are operating in a deficit. It appears as though they were operating at a $30,000 fund balance deficit in '24, and it looks like that number has increased to almost $35,000 deficit in '25. My concern would be, the sustainability of the Community Needs Fund. Can you talk to that at all?
No, I agree. I mean, I believe it also goes back to 23 and if slightly smaller in 22. I mean, this fund there are more needs out there than funds coming in. And so at some point, we are going to have a conversation about this going forward as we are on an unsustainable path. I don't know that making sort of major cuts this year is going to be of any benefit. I think what we need to do is start searching out additional sources of funding on a go-forward basis.
Okay. As long as we're all on the same page that we should probably get to work on that now, because they're not going to survive through 2026 if they don't have a.
Correct.
Okie dokie. And then I've only got 2 more, believe it or not. 89, page 89. This is just the capital, sorry.
Can I ask a question about the
Please, yeah.
Community Needs Fund while you're on that topic? Is the special events in that, what is special events in the Community Needs Fund? Is that fundraising? I don't see fundraising. We used to do fundraising. Am I thinking?
I actually don't have a note on that, interestingly.
So.
Unless my finance director has that answer, I'm going to have to follow up on that one. It got me.
They said it couldn't be done.
Occasionally, they'll have special events for things like special fundraisers. I think in 2023, I think that was, let me see. They had a special grant. I know they got 1 year, so this could be special grant funding. But I have to look back at my notes for additional detail or anything that went into that. Usually I try to give some detail in the description of that budget classification, but if I haven't, I can add that in.
Thank you. It'd be nice to have something underneath this explaining what the special events expenditure was, and I can't tell from this if it's a fundraising event or if it's backpacking event or what.
Additional clarification below in the notes.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wilson?
We got a $15,000 grant for holiday baskets. It could be that.
This is in the expenditures area, though.
Yeah, this is an expenditure.
Yeah, we'll follow.
Well, I think it's to offset the $15,000 grant that they got.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, page 89, Capital Projects Fund. So outside of what we spend the money on, my question is how, have we given a whole lot of thought to how we replenish this fund over time? Obviously, we put a tranche of funding in several years ago. Eventually, if we continue on the way we're going, it will simply go away over time as we come up with more projects and fund them through this fund. We're making a modest amount in interest each year, but, what is a typical funding mechanism to replenish the capital project, or a capital projects fund that you've seen in other communities?
Well, I would argue not many communities have something like this because they fund their capital generally out of their general fund. So it's interesting that we did set aside funding to specifically go towards capital projects. And so where you're going to fund this is through general fund allocations, by and large. Certainly, I think the sustainable way to fund it is to, find a level of growth that we're comfortable with in the general fund and siphon off a percentage of that on an annual basis. But that obviously takes away from other priorities potentially. And so it's really a weighing of priorities. It's a good thing to have and we don't obviously have to make those investments this year if the board would prefer not to make those investments out of the capital projects fund, but it's not like there's a tax mechanism or something to be able to directly replenish this. It's a general fund function.
Got it. Okay, well, that does answer the question. I appreciate that. So, as we consider what to do with, if we get to a point where we have a looser budget, moving some over into this area, I suppose, would be a fine way to do that. I did notice very early on that there was a $1.3 million transfer to the capital projects fund that was supposed to be made in 2024, but or maybe it was 2023, but was not. Can you explain what happened there?
It was 2024, and we are showing no evidence that it was budgeted for. It was in the budget message, but not actually in the line item in our review.
Really?
Correct.
So the managerial budget message for the 2024 budget message said we are going to transfer 1.3 million, and oopsie, it wasn't actually included in the budget.
I can go back and triple check that, but I believe that is where we landed when we analyzed that.
Can we follow up on that, please?
We can.
Thank you. And then I think the last thing may have been at least partially covered by Trustee Wilson, and it's regarding the EDC. And I have similar concerns to the Community Needs Fund, which is that it appears as though the community promotion is perhaps spending themselves into a zero budget. Can you talk to me about, we talked about the 10,000 miscellaneous in revenue. Can we talk about the 25,000 in community promotion and why that is where it is? 110.
110?
So in 2023, they budgeted 11,000, or the actual was 11,804. We more than doubled that in '24 to 25, almost 25,000, and we're retaining that level despite operating at a deficit for the last 2 years. Seems to me you reduce that down to $10,000 or about where they were in 2023, and we don't run a deficit anymore, a structural deficit.
Understood. I'm going to need to follow up on that one. I don't have any notes on that one either.
Okay. I would appreciate it. That is all of my notes. Other board members? Trustee Trezise?
Yes, I'm looking at page 129 of the budget. It's 163 on the packet. The Climate Sustainability Program. For 2024, we budgeted $30,000 for the climate sustainability. It says we're going to spend $30,000, but having been on the Environmental Commission, I don't think we're going to be close to that in 2024. But it doesn't indicate anything for 2025. And I understand we're not putting more into that, but I'm wondering what the carryover would be for 2025.
Sure. So right now, we have nothing funded this for the 2025 budget. We do have plans this year. So we've made some purchases to help the gleaning team at the marketplace. So pop-up tent, table throw cover, some various office supplies that they needed. We are planning to do an RFP to do some tree planting along Carlton and Hickory Island, where we had to remove some trees for a local road program project in order to get the equipment in and out because of how narrow the roads are. So we have a draft RFP that we're working on for that. And then Emma and Leroy, our environmental coordinator and land preservation steward coordinator, also have a rough outline of a plan, but correct. I don't anticipate that we are going to achieve spending the whole $30,000 this year.
Well,
so we could look at rolling forward what we lapse at the end of the year. I think we just need more time at this point.
Okay, I thought those were going through the Environmental Commission, whatever the expenditures were, and I haven't seen some of them while sitting on the commission. So the tree planting, I don't believe came through there as an environmental grant or a sustainability grant. So you may want to bring that information to the Environmental Commission so that they know what they've got left in their budget. They're meeting tomorrow. So at least let Leroy know what other expenditures are anticipated to be charged from that fund so that we know what's going forward.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Other board members? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. I have some questions for Ann. Sorry, if you could go back up. The cemetery rates in the cemetery. So on page 82 of the packet, it has the expenditures for the cemetery, and then on page 51, it has the cemetery rates with the rate increases. Can you speak to the expenditures of the cemetery? And because I feel like that is an area where we're not covering our costs.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any public cemetery in the state that's actually covering and recouping their costs. But our costs there are approximately $37,000 annually just to mow and weed whip the cemetery. That's 26 mows per calendar year. I think we're currently at $1,400 per mow on our contract. Then obviously we have 2 staff members who are assigned to all 7 major facilities that are non-park facilities, the buildings, the grounds, and then also the cemetery. So part of those 2 employee salaries comes out of the cemetery And then predominantly, aside from that, it's paying the natural gas bill and other things of that nature, basic operating supplies for the staff and employees, maintenancing the backhoe that we have devoted to the cemetery when necessary. But yeah, I forget off the top of my head all the numbers that you and I discussed earlier, Clerk Guthrie, but it does operate at a loss, and there's not really going to be a scenario in which it doesn't operate at a loss. We also have two cemeteries, one of which is full. The Riverside Cemetery near Small Acres Lane and Grand River Avenue. And then we will inherit a third cemetery on Bennett Road. Because under state law, we have to assume all private cemeteries, we assume control of them once they have filled up and the proprietor can no longer profit off the land. So we will be incurring a third cemetery at some point in the future. But this is, last year we took a break on increases to the cemetery rates, and this year we have proposed some meaningful increases, as we did in the 2023 budget as well.
So in looking at these rates and in knowing that your statement that we'll never recoup our costs, I just found some of these rates odd. I'm not sure how they were come up with, but $1,430 for a non-resident for an adult burial space seems like you could just round it up to $1,500. You know, instead of $1,430, you're rounded down to $1,400, so you still maintain that $300 difference. I just found, oh my gosh, I have a pop-up, just a second. I just found in these rates here that some of them could increase a little bit more than what's on there to maybe some even numbers. And like I said, I particularly found that burial space for an adult very odd. The other thing I want to make the board aware of is that we have been working on a cemetery ordinance, and that will be coming to the board. And one of the items in that is, and I'm trying to find it in here, is the cemetery deed buyback. And in our budget, it says price of purchase. And I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correctly, that the attorneys wrote 65% buyback, which is weird. You can change it in the ordinance. That means that if you bought it for $1 in 1900, that we would buy it for 65% back of that dollar. So I just want to raise that it's in there. Doesn't have to be when it comes to the board. Maybe it needs to match what's in here in this budget.
So going in order, to your first question, Clerk Guthrie, the rates do come out to some strange, what some could argue are strange numbers, but it was just 10% across the board.
Okay.
So $1,000 per resident for a township resident was increased to $1,100. $1,300 for a non-resident for one adult space was increased to $1,430, so just a 10%. And you can go through all the rates. They all increased 10% with maybe like one exception where it was going to be a very strange number. Okay. And I went with some kind of rounding off, but it's pretty much 10% across the board.
And you're satisfied with that percentage increase?
That's significant. We'll probably take a year off again and then come back and look at doing another, 10 to 15% increase to try to get to a place where we're not subsidizing the cemetery to the extent that we are. But again, it's one of those situations where it's sins of our fathers. We can't change decades of rate setting, but we also want to look at other cemeteries in the region and make sure we're not pricing folks out either. So.
And then while you're up there, I have another question for you. Page 59 of the packet, which is page 25, 59 or 20, 59 of the packet. So in here, under the municipal building, you have, let me get to a position where I can actually read it. Electronic door control systems budgeted for 2027, and you have safety enhancements budgeted for 2028. Can you speak to what those safety enhancements are prior to me making a recommendation?
Yes, so the 400,000 for the fiscal year 2027 would be the swipe card access system for the municipal building specifically. Central Fire is outfitted with one from its original construction, and we retrofitted one to the public safety building last year using some of the ARPA funds. The safety enhancements for fiscal year 2028 would be pretty much everything else that the state had made recommendations for, which would be counter to ceiling glass at our front counters, panic buttons for closing the main entrances to the building and locking them down.
That's a separate line item.
Yeah, we put panic buttons as separate.
Oh, you did put the panic buttons as a separate.
That's the one thing that's separate, sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember everything that's in that study, but
So I would like to make a recommendation on how feasible this is, because it may involve other line items. But 2028 is a presidential year, and I would make the recommendation that that work is done in 2027, not 2028. We had two very heated people today in the building that had to be kicked out, and people are continually getting more heated. And staff is vulnerable at the counter, and I don't know why people come in and are yelling and are very nice staff who's just trying to help them pay their bill. But it just, and, you know, Treasurer DeShane can attest to the number of people that come in here yelling at our staff members. And I can hear it, it's all day long, every day. And to have some protection for them, I think is one of the most important things that we can do. And with 2028 being a presidential election year, I would rather see those things happen before 2028. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be clear, this is in the CIP, and so this is more of a planning document as opposed to written in stone. The only thing that's really not even written in stone in the CIP is the 2025. So we can absolutely move those up to 27. Makes total sense. And to the point earlier about the number of water projects that are shown for 26, everything out of 25 is functionally fungible here. The point of the CIP is to show that the need exists and we need to start planning for how we're going to pay for it. Most of them are not necessarily prioritized. I mean, some of them are prioritized in order of like, this needs to happen. But, you know, the parks is a great example. You know, we were able to pull Marshall Park forward, and so that caused some costs for next year to Marshall Park, which moved some other things around. And so the CIP is just trying to show that this is coming. And so, yeah, absolutely, we'll push that one forward and get it out of a presidential year, and so it's more likely to be able to happen that year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I have I think this is my final question. Make sure all this stuff is. I have one for Treasurer DeShane, and I have one for Director Wazinski. So on page, Director Wazinski, I think it's on, I lost the page where it's on.
For parks.
I'll say what it is, maybe you can help me find it. I thought it was page 110, land preservation. The land preservation, it shows,
Reserve fund.
yes, thank you. The estimated available fund balance as of December 31st, 2025 is $3.4 million. Can you, I'll wait for you to get there. It's page 110 of the packet and page 76.
Thank you.
At the bottom, page 76, the PDF, page 110.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, I gotta get back there, because now
This is the acquisition fund.
purchasing. Yes, the Land Preservation Reserve Fund, in that statement of fund balance, it says $3.4 million. Can you speak to that money and what is done with that, where it goes? Is there a plan?
It's restricted.
I know it's restricted.
It is restricted.
And I had made a couple of recommendations for land preservation purchase off Van Anna Road with the former Director of Parks and Recreation Maisner. And I know she looked into it and said the property owners who were selling it weren't interested, kind of thing. But, so if you could just speak to that, I don't know if there's a way the board can work with Land Preserve, or if the Land Preservation Advisory Board has some suggestions of what to do with that. And I know we decreased the millage for it, and I don't want it completely depleted. I know we need to take care of these preserves as well.
So this is acquisition funding.
Yep.
Stewardship funding comes from a different part of that millage. So this is just for acquisitions. And the direction that we've moved is much less acquisition and our focus on stewardship. So right now, we have over 1,000 acres of land preserves that are run by one person in the entire department.
Yes.
Of course, we have a fantastic seasonal help. MSU helps a lot. So our focus is on the existing pieces of very ecologically valuable land and how do we manage that land. And for example, prior to me stepping in this role, I had no idea what that meant. And that means out of all 1,000 acres, there's an assessment consistently being completed on where our invasive species are, where our native species, how can we manage that so these land preserves are actually of ecological value, not only to that's aesthetically pleasing, but for the flora, the fauna, everything else that we want to be ecologically impacting in Meridian. So not to say that the Preservation Board and or the department would ever say no to a property looking at what could be ecologically contributing, but we're just being very strategic with what that might look like and how that might be maintained moving forward. So that fund really, the last parcel that we purchased was on Cornell Road, across from Cornell Woods, and those buyers came to the Preservation Advisory Board, Land Preservation Advisory Board, asking to see if we would consider that. So I wouldn't want to speak for the manager. We're always open to ideas, but we just want to be very strategic so that we can maintain what we have at the best value.
Is that something that you advertise or would put in Prime Meridian magazine, or is that something where you're too strategic just to put a blanket statement out there if you're interested in selling, or would that just make the price go
Yes.
skyrocket?
Yes.
Okay, all right, the last part, okay. And so this 3.4 million, what percentage of is there any percentage of the land preservation millage that is used to maintain the land preserves?
Correct, yes.
Is that percentage 25%? Is my memory serving me correctly, or somewhere around there?
Oh, I'd have to look into that, which I can do.
Okay, can the percentage be increased, or does the acquisition have to be maintained at a certain percentage and we can't take away that percentage at all?
As I understand it, based on the millage language, that is correct.
Okay. All right. I don't know if there's any other questions or.
Well, I'll comment on that particular point, which is, this board has stated a couple of times that we may be at our max capacity for land preserve. And so, certainly we have $3.4 million sitting there that may well sit there until the end of time, since this is restricted. Unless boards present or future change our stance on that, there may not be anything that we spend that money on. I think the corollary to that conversation is, we have $4.3 million in our land preservation millage fund, the unrestricted fund. And some portion of that certainly is used for maintenance and upkeep and whatnot, but even in the 2025 budget, we're bringing in $320,000 and spending $260,000. And so, essentially, we are continuing to grow that fund by $61,000. We could not collect that millage for 20 years, thereabouts, and still have money in our land preserve millage fund. I think there is a question in my mind whether we need to continue to collect that at its full rate. Albeit the voters did vote for it, and I respect their wishes, but there is a certain degree to which this is money that we are taking in that we really do not need, not in the short term. And I don't believe, our voters are going to change their mind about whether this is something they want. We can always come back and either decrease this at the next renewal or not levy it as much and then, bring it back at renewal time. I think there's, for residents who have concerns about the tax burden, this is not a big millage, but it is something, and every dollar counts. And this is one where I think, the township may consider exploring whether this is something we absolutely need to charge them for in the short to medium term.
Thank you. I think it would be very prudent of the board to reassess this and look at this money coming in. And then I have one question for Treasurer DeShane, I believe. Let me see if I can find it.
Is it regarding the investment advisor?
It is, there's a change in delinquent taxes. There's a significant percentage change in delinquent taxes. And maybe, let me see if I can find it. And I just wondered what that was. Getting there. If you didn't make this budget packet section so big, it wouldn't take so long to find all this stuff.
My sincerest apologies. Are you referring to the line item budget?
I wrote it down and now I'm not quite sure. Maybe we need to come back to me until I find it.
Right.
I can't remember where it is because I wrote the page down wrong. Sorry, my apologies.
Or you can email me tomorrow and I can reply to the whole board.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Have we talked ourselves out? All right. I think we've had some good discussion here, a lot of interesting points raised. We've got a couple of things to tweak and change. Mr. Schmidt, are you relatively comfortable with what's been asked of you?
Absolutely. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a final budget.
All right. Thank you, and thank you to our residents who have been waiting very patiently.
Thank you.
I will ask that we take a very brief recess. Let's try to keep it to 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll come back at 8:50. was, I think when Courtney left.
No, when Pat resigned.
Yeah.
When you became supervisor is when it's the election.
It's the elections.
That's what it is. It's the
We're past it now. I'm hungry. Let's get this done and go get some food.
Agreed.
Can't. I go home and cook for my wife.
Well, bring her with you.
I can go.
Really put
Since
a
the house is
damper
open
on the
till
whole
4
night.
a.m.
I've had
Who are you asking about?
zero food to, well, that's not true. I had a yogurt for lunch.
All right, we'll bring us back to order. It is 8:53. So next on our agenda is item 13B, ordinance 2024-06 to rezone 4.28 acres of vacant land on Dovey Road from RAA to single-family low-density residential to RC multiple family. Mr. Schmidt is here, as are a number of our dedicated residents to talk about this one. So, Mr. Schmidt, what do you have for us?
Thank you. So the request in front of you this evening, this is as good a map as any. The request in front of you this evening is to rezone this northern piece of the highlighted red from its current designation of RAA to RC. Currently, the property was previously a portion of the Faith Lutheran Church parcel. It was split off earlier this year and sold for development after the master plan update was finalized last year. And so the request, previous zoning RAA is consistent with the use of the property as a church, as is consistent with the surrounding properties to the south, east, and the west. The RC is consistent with the property to the north and the northeast, as those are both apartment complexes. This is a classic edge parcel. This is a classic transition parcel from a zoning perspective, and so that's where you see this kind of discussion. Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on the matter on June 10th and received a substantial amount of opposition and feedback, and they did end up recommending denial by a vote of 4-1 to the Planning Commission, due largely to the concerns raised by the neighborhood. There was a meeting held by the applicant with the neighbors on August 22nd. Staff was there, and we appreciate the effort on both parties trying to have a conversation, but there was no major breakthrough as a result of that. And that's why we are back in front of you this evening, is this is the next step in the process for the Township Board to discuss it. I'd be happy to answer any questions or follow up on any discussion at this time. What I can say that it is, at least partially consistent with the master plan, because the master plan was changed for a portion of the property. But this gets into an interesting, it's an interesting conundrum a lot of times with master plans. Some communities don't put parcel lines on their master plans because they're intended to be more amorphous boundaries, and especially in this case where there was no parcel line there before. The intent of the plan was clearly just a portion of the property to be for multifamily use. And so the question I think in front of the board is, one of the questions in front of the board is this too much? Is this what we anticipated or not in terms of the master plan update? Because it's certainly a portion of it is in compliance with what the master plan would expect to see there. Issues with traffic and drainage and things like that will be addressed at the time of site plan. I can tell you this is also not a contract zoning proposal. The applicant did present a rudimentary concept plan in their packet. I can tell you that, that is unlikely to be what gets built, just for any number of reasons. But specific site-related items only get addressed, like drainage and traffic, once we get to the actual site plan review. So happy to answer any questions about the rezoning that's in front of you this evening.
Thank you very much. Is there a representative of the applicant here this evening?
There's not. We appear to have gotten some wires crossed, it appears.
Okay. This item is for discussion. There will be no action on this item this evening. Board members wishing to make discussion, trustee McCombs.
Yeah, so I have just a couple of questions. First, you said a second ago that portion of it is part of the master plan. Does that mean that another portion of it is not?
So yeah, when the master plan was updated, let me scroll down here, I'll show you. So this is a fair rough representation of what we're talking about here, right? So this parcel, when the plan was originally created, this was all one parcel. And now we're proposing a split that's roughly in this area. And so this portion was designated on the master plan as multifamily, while this portion was still left behind. We didn't have surveys, nor should we have surveys during the time of the master plan discussion. We didn't have specifics as to where that line should go. The discussion was, the roughly northern third of the property to be rezoned. And so that's what's in front of you. The red outline that you see here, and let me zoom in a little, no, I can't zoom in any closer.
We can see it.
Nope. That red outline is roughly what was split off, and so it's slightly larger than I think we may have anticipated.
Thank you for that. So I was on, what's the street? It's Central Park, and then it turns into Dolby, right? So I was on Central Park looking to make a left-hand turn today on Grand River. And even with the turn arrow, there's a lot of traffic, like around that, I'm gonna say it's around 4:45, 5 o'clock. I say that too because some residents who were here earlier and still here now talked about the traffic and the concern with the density of the traffic, right? And I share that same concern because I take that road sometimes. I say that's to ask this. It says it was I took some notes, 14 dwelling units, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what and did they ever, I didn't see it, maybe I missed it. What is the maximum number of residents if it's 14 units?
I mean, in theory, there's no maximum because we don't, a family can be 2 people, or it can be 12 people.
Doesn't a building have I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim. But
No, in theory, this is where I put my building hat on for a second. In theory, under the building code, there's a maximum number of residents that can be in any unit, given based on the size of bedrooms and stuff like that. But even that, once you get into a family situation, can be.
Yeah.
So, fair estimate, 2-bedroom unit, 3 people. That's a reasonable estimate. Because the census data would tell us that our average household size is between 2 and 3. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, so I was thinking so you got 14 units and you
I'm sorry, trustee, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to point out, I think you're looking at 14 dwelling units per acre, and this site is 4.28 acres, which comes out to about 60 units.
So it's even more.
Yeah, 60 possible based on, I mean, it may not be possible on the site, but in terms of the density possible.
Yeah. So thank you for pointing that out. So I did read it wrong, but I read it wrong in a crazy way. So now, with that enlightenment, that's even more residents that could be here on that site that could create even more of a traffic, high density situation right there. What is and I know that we're going to have to look at criteria. The Planning Commission had to do the same thing. What is the criteria for something like that when it comes to the density and the, potential high traffic and that sort of thing. Can you talk or speak to that? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, page 294 of your packet is the standards for rezoning that we utilize in the township. It's actually just before this.
And I saw the criteria too for the planning commission.
So that's generally what we're utilizing here, for how we review these. And so specifically to traffic, you're looking at something, like, B4, or potentially maybe under B6, as to where we would have a negative finding.
So I didn't see anything specifically about traffic. That's the reason why.
It's really B4 is the big one. It's significant adverse impacts on traffic circulation. It's not necessarily that it's adding a ton of traffic, it's that it would have an impact on the circulation.
Okay. Those are the questions I had, or discussion items I had. Thank you.
Other board members? Treasurer DeShane.
I'm curious about the process of the future land use map being changed with the 2023 master plan to make this multifamily. It sounded like the only people that were advocating for that were people from the church. Is that correct?
That's fair. We, despite staff's best efforts, did not get a lot of feedback on the master plan, and so the people that were advocated hard for their positions.
3 different times, as I understand.
Oh, it was more than, they were at almost every meeting where it was discussed.
Okay, so it wasn't done because it made sense to the planning commission. It was more, they kept coming back and put enough pressure on the planning commission. The planning commission eventually acquiesced to the church.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think that the planning commission saw a certain amount of common sense in the change. I don't think there was a pressure campaign by any stretch. Planning commission has certainly been able to say no to people. But I think, this is the second time this kind of request came up from the church, and one of the feedback items that the church got when it was denied previously was that it was because it's not in compliance with the master plan. And so the church engaged as part of the master plan update to have their property changed. That's part of how the master planning process works.
Okay. And the planning commission turned this down recently 4-1, and then they earlier voted 7-0 against this back when it had the other designation of RCC. Is that correct? It's been, this concept of this plan has been turned down by the planning commission twice, is that correct?
So not the plan, just the zoning.
Okay.
The previous zoning, if I had been the director, I would not have advised them to even move forward with it, because at that point, it's an easy answer. It's not in compliance with the master plan. It's a simple denial. I would have expected both the planning commission and the board at that time to deny it unanimously.
Okay, thank you. I don't support rezoning this from R A to RC. I mean, you can make the argument that there is higher density to the north, but the traffic concerns, the way this would back up on Seneca, it just doesn't fit. And Dobie Road, I live off of Dobie Road. Dobie Road has a ton of traffic already. It's very difficult, many hours of the day to get in and off of it, and turning at Grand River is a real challenge. I just don't think this is the right fit. I appreciate the residents that come out here. When I was campaigning, I heard from many of the residents, and they've worked hard on this issue. They've investigated the traffic and the impact of it. They're very concerned about it. And I understand their concern. There's lots of reasons to oppose this. And so I will not be in support of going against the planning commission to rezone this property.
Thank you very much. Trustee Trezise?
Yeah, at least 2 of us were on the planning commission when it was turned down in 2017. At the time, the proposal would have required a zoning change as well as site review, and what was presented to us involved a smaller piece of property than here proposed, and considerable increase in the density. I don't believe it went to 14 per acre, but it was significant, and the zoning commission or the planning commission decided that didn't make sense from a zoning standpoint and from a utilization standpoint, so it was turned down. I don't believe they appealed it to the township board, and so it stayed that way. The church has consistently come to the planning commission requesting a change in zoning initially and then a change in the master plan for what they described as the top third of their property because it was unusable to them, and frankly, they wanted to sell it and needed the money. There weren't a lot of bidders when this was zoned at RAA because it's a strange piece of property from a size standpoint. The proposal here, I would not support, primarily because it does not meet with the master plan entirely, and also because it's gotten a lot more involved than what was originally discussed. I could see making this allowing some multifamily houses on here or buildings on here, but 14 per acre is just too much for this space. And so I don't see a reason to overturn the recommendation from the planning commission at this time.
Okay. Other board members? Trustee Wilson.
On that 4-1 vote, when was that taken at the planning commission?
It was
July 8th.
2 weeks, 3, oh, was it, that's right, it was still in July. Because then we paused it so they could schedule the public meeting. Yes, it was the second meeting in July.
Okay. So at that time, the planning commission turned it down for what reasons?
They had concern, they were listening to the concerns that were raised by the public and had concerns with the density and the traffic.
We have a real conundrum here because we have a portion of it in the master plan is multi, and we have a portion of it not in the master plan. It's still single family. And since we don't split parcels, or that certainly is the last thing you want to do, I believe. Is that correct?
I would agree, yes.
Okay. I think there are only 5 parcels in the whole community that are split zoning. It makes it really difficult to make a decision on this. I'm really challenged. Is there any kind of, on my same theme of a compromise, is there any multifamily density less than RC?
Absolutely, RC is right in the middle.
So
You go down to RD or RDD at 8 and 5 units to the acre respectively.
RD and RDD?
Yep.
RD is 8 per acre, RDD is 5 per acre.
What is it again, 8 and 5?
RD is 8, RDD is 5.
Given the challenge of this parcel, maybe we could look to a lower density than the 14 units per acre. And I thought we were not really, until site plan review, we really don't look at traffic.
Traffic can play a role in a rezoning.
It can.
Because you are looking at how the request will impact the traffic patterns.
Okay.
But usually at the rezoning level, you're looking at it as sort of a rough outline stage, right? We think it's 4 acres, maximum density is X, right? And so you have this sort of worst case scenario.
I would concur, and RC density is, I think, too high for this area. And I'm really challenged by the fact that a portion's in the master plan is multi and a portion is single family.
Institutional, actually. Institutional.
It's institutional, which is a whole different problem, but.
Institutional, yeah.
Yeah. I think, I concur that this is a very challenging rezoning. I shared the thought about whether we should look to a less dense rezoning, which may split the difference and make nobody happy, which of course is the best form of compromise. But given that we don't have an applicant here to answer any questions about this development, and whether or not they would even be interested in such a compromise, I see no reason why we should even continue to talk about this evening, and hopefully try to get them to come back at a later meeting to have a conversation about this, since the board, it seems like, just based on the tenor of the conversation, is not willing to simply throw this in for a straight approval. And would at least like to talk about, what our future options are. Do you think we can get the applicant to remember what day our meeting is next time around?
I've already emailed them, so.
Are we under time constraint here?
We're not under a time.
We're under no time constraint.
Yeah, so let's bring this back once more for discussion, I think.
Absolutely.
And, Clerk Guthrie, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. So for that split zoning, can it be unsplit? Can that institutional portion be rezoned? Can there be a rezoning for both those pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, so right now, because of the size of the parcel that was split off, right? The master plan boundary doesn't align with the property boundaries. That's kind of the conundrum here. So then certainly you could rezone the entire parcel to whatever designation that is deemed appropriate, whether it's RC or whether it's RR. As long as there's justification under the standards and there's support under the master plan. Changing the sort of split designation under the master plan right now is a more complicated process, and we won't be undertaking that until our next master plan update. But yes, it will be fixed in the next master plan update, one way or another.
So you couldn't do that for these two parcels that are different?
No, it's not as simple as just change. So rezoning is relatively simple to make a change. Hold a public hearing, make a decision. Hold a public hearing, make a recommendation, make a decision.
Yeah.
The master plan requires 63 days of public notice of intent to plan, and then plan, and then 63 days notice of intent to change, and then a public hearing, a recommendation. Like, it's a 6-month process just to make that one change.
But you don't need to make changes in the master plan to change the zoning.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you could rezone this as it is with the master plan as it is. It's just, the master plan is meant to guide us as to how we zone. So it's not split zoning that we would be doing. It would be, it's just part of the parcel would be in non-compliance with the master plan if we were to move forward with the rezoning of the full parcel.
Okay, got it. And then if I could, I wanted to thank the residents for coming out as well. My grandpa built a house on Dobie Road, and my friend lived on Seneca Drive, and my friend and I would cross Dobie Road all the time. My mom's dog was killed on Dobie Road while she was growing up. So I'm very familiar with the area. I'm very familiar with the problems that the houses behind Arrow Tree had for a number of years, and maybe they still have it, I don't know, with trash that was being dumped in the back and being dumped over the fence. We're talking the 70s, right? So this is a long time ago. So I'm very familiar with that area. You've probably been here long enough. You probably even know the family that lived on Seneca. So I thank you for coming and sharing these concerns, because I lived there and I understand those concerns. And my grandma lived there for like ever. And so I'm very familiar with the traffic there and trying to cross those streets, trying to get in and out of the church area, the problems that have already existed with the multiple dwelling units that are currently there, with the apartment complexes that are there. And so I thank you for coming and sharing all of that with the board, because I share in those concerns as well.
Treasurer Shane.
I suggest we bring this back for action. The fact that Mr. Friedel didn't make this meeting, I don't think we should put this off for another week of discussion, another week of decision. He can come next meeting, if he wants to make a comment, he'd be able to do that. But these residents have been here 3.5 hours waiting for this discussion. And to replay it all next week because he didn't get the meeting date right, I don't think it's fair. Plus, look at this, we're at 9:15 now. We've got other items on the agenda. We need to work at, keeping our meetings as, not pad our meetings by taking something up for discussion twice because the applicant missed the meeting.
Well, I understand that. If we were to if we bring it back for action next time, the staff will have to draft a resolution to, either oppose or, approve the denial or reject the denial or whatever it is. If there's a middle ground to be had, we'll be having it back a third time anyway.
I think they've tried to find a middle ground. Staff held a meeting with the applicant and the residents. They got nowhere, so they've already taken that step.
Well,
if they want to bring back a third proposal at some future point with a different zoning, that's a different discussion. What we have in front of us is a specific request here to go from.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So we are empowered to make a change to their proposal at the board level, are we not? Tim?
Absolutely. The board has the ability to.
To answer your question, I don't mind bringing it back for action with the motion to deny the rezoning. And maybe that lights a fire under Mr. Fedua to come back before us, and maybe he finds it within himself to have a more agreeable conversation with the residents in the meantime. I would not approve it if it were put before us as it were today.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that's wise. So I guess at this point, let's bring a motion for denial. Let Mr. Fedua know that we have a meeting on the 17th, and he's welcome to come and have it, and present to us a little bit, even though it's for action, not discussion, at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Understood.
Trustee McCurtis.
I just want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with Treasurer DeShank, and I'll leave it at that. But I do want to say, if it was that important, it seemed like he wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, and my only concern is that there was a miscommunication on our part.
Okay.
But we'll address that.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate the residents sticking with us, as we said. We'll move on to agenda item 13C, donation of fire equipment. Chief Hamel.
Supervisor and board, thank you. So post-COVID, one of the things that started happening across Michigan is there's a big push from a group to any old equipment that fire departments were willing to potentially donate to a lot of departments in need up in the UP mainly. In fact, there was some equipment that was sent to Mexico as well as Ukraine just last year. East Lansing spearheaded that one to Ukraine. And so, a lot of the equipment that's sent is like PP&E, structural firefighting gear that's close to the end of its 10 years but hasn't met it yet. And SCBA's, medical equipment, and, for example, a small department with not much of a budget in the UP, set of firefighter gear is $3,500. An SCBA is $9,000 today. All the stuff they have to do their job. And then, we're lucky here. I've got a great board that supports us. We've got a great community that supports us. So last year, Lansing Township donated a engine to Raybor, which is actually in Chippewa, near the department that actually is looking at potentially taking a donation from us. They are in the eastern UP, I-75 and M28 area. So Dafter is the township that's interested in our engine, and they have a population of, I wrote it down, 1,263 people. So it's a very small community, not a lot of money. And so they came down and looked at it August 12th, December, I'm ahead of myself, August 12th. And while they were there, they heard us talking about replacing our Cascade. They actually drive 45 minutes today to fill their bottles if they have a fire. That's the closest place. So I said, I can't guarantee you anything. I'll take it to the board to talk to my boss first, and see if the board would entertain doing this. Like I said, Lansing Township, they donated an engine a year ago. Same concept. If we were to auction it off, I think the ladder truck, when we auctioned that off, we got a little over 2,000. It's money in the pocket, I get it, but I also have obviously a heart for small fire departments with not much, to be able to do their job safely and effectively. They're using a 1985 pumper today that they were given from the DNR.
Yeah.
So this is an upgrade to a 1992, I think is what it is. But it is definitely an upgrade, and they understand it's coming with issues, and these smaller departments are actually very resourceful. They manage their own equipment pretty well. So that's what I'm here for today. If you're at all interested in making these donations or a donation, that's when I wanted to kind of see what you thought, if you'd be interested in allowing it to happen or not, and we'll go from there. So, sorry.
Treasurer DeShane.
You know, this would make me feel good, you feel good, but we can't really do this because we have a fiduciary responsibility to our residents. We own equipment, and we can't just give it to a UP department that doesn't have any, because it's an asset not owned by the board, but owned by the township. So I think it'd be more useful for me if you came back with a fair market appraisal of the fire.
Well, the appraisal will be at an auction. We don't have an appraisal. It's 25 years old.
So there's no one that can give you what the truck is worth?
I guess I could ask Rob McKenzie to do that, but I don't, yeah.
Well, there's some worth to it. They wouldn't have driven down here for it. I think we could sell it to them for what it's worth, but we just can't give away township assets because it makes us feel good. Lansing Township has a ton of problems right now, and to me, they're the kind of the last township should be giving away assets either. I mean, this is where the state of Michigan comes in, I gotta think. You know, we get grants from the state. This township believes in regionalism. We support CATA, even though we use a small portion of the CATA services. We support the CATA library system, airport authority. Our residents are very generous, but I think this crosses the line when it's something in the UP, and I'm just not comfortable giving away an asset that has some value, A, until we know what it's worth, and B, if we find out if they're willing to pay us for what it's worth. Because again, it might make us feel good to do it, but it's our job as trustees of the township is to make sure that we protect our assets and get fair market value for them, regardless of how it makes us feel.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Hendrickson. I disagree respectfully. This township has donated equipment to other communities before. I know, because we had obsolete equipment that was of no use to us and no value. So I understand wanting to know the value of this equipment to our communications department, just because we upgraded equipment. And when you upgrade equipment, if it's obsolete and you can no longer use it and you can't sell it and nobody else is buying it because that stuff is out of date, the only other option is to donate it to somebody else. And we donated a bunch of editing equipment years ago to Williamston Schools. And they used that, and the township board approved it, and they used that equipment for, I don't know how long, but they were super appreciative. They sent us a thank you letter. So I know that this township has donated equipment and other things to other communities when it has become obsolete to this township, and there is no value any longer. And I know that there's an assessment that's done with the finance department of when something is of no value and we can donate it at that point. And so that's something that I would like to see, that assessment has been made in order for this board to make that kind of decision. And I think it's not just a feel good, but it's a cooperative thing to do with other departments. And we've certainly received, this township, our clerk's department has received donated items from East Lansing to put some of our election equipment in. They gave us a bunch of cases one year worth a couple $1,000s. So I have seen other communities do that, and I'm not opposed to doing that in this situation. I think it's a good thing to do.
Trustee McCurry, see your hand up.
Yes, I just have a question. In terms of, does it, and I don't know who can answer it, but in terms of making a donation, is there a tax incentive, tax write-off or anything for a township? Do we do that?
We don't pay taxes.
Oh, that's true. Okay, the answer's that.
Good answer.
That's a good question.
Now,
Trustee Trezise.
I know the state has a program for taking surplus and disposing of it, sometimes through sale, auction, sometimes through delivery to another municipality. So I would look into how that would work in this situation and see if there's a way that we can do this, because I think to the extent that we have equipment we can't use, has minimal value from our standpoint, and surplus to us. If we can find another community that has need for it, that we can transfer it to, I'm all for that. And if there has to be a small fee, if it's something to address Treasurer DeShane's point, if we have to say, we will, it's surplus to us, we feel it has a value of $500, we'll sell it to you for $500 or something like that to accomplish this, I'm okay with that. I don't need a full appraisal on a 25-year-old pumper, which may stop working tomorrow. Or the Cascade system, which is the other thing you had here, that is even older, I believe.
It's about the same age.
Is it? Somehow I don't know that any appraisal would be very informative at that age. So I would support this if we can do this legally.
Other board members? Trustee Wilson.
I would like you to ascertain a value. And if it's $2,000, then I think it should be sold for $2,000. I would assume they could afford that and they're getting a good deal.
I did ask the company that were buying the new Cascade system if they could give me a value on it, this one, and they won't give me one. They said, we can't tell you if it's worth $1, but they're not going to put it, they're not going to, they just said they wouldn't do it.
Maybe you and Rob could come up with something.
I will definitely talk to Rob on that.
Okay. Sounds like we might be seeing you back with a little bit, a few extra numbers perhaps. I don't think this is something that we should put away forever. I think this is something that we absolutely should explore. I agree with the treasurer that if we can find a way to just get a sense of what we think it might be worth. But maybe a full appraisal is not worth the cost and time to do it. But, the $2,000 is illuminating on the last one, especially given what we're paying for a new one.
For sure.
Certainly, if it's in that ballpark, I'd be much more amenable to trying to find a small arrangement with them to do that. But let's at least do our homework, make sure we're doing our financial, fiduciary responsibility to our residents, and talk again soon.
Okay, and we have till the end of December. We're going to get the 2 new engines sometime the first part of December, so they won't even be in service for probably 3 weeks. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question. Is this truck in service right now?
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Well,
being,
it's our reserve, but it's in service right now with the truck being out, so.
thank you.
Clerk Duffy, you had a question as well?
I'd also like to know, when you come back to the board, what the financial policy is on donating equipment to other communities. I'm sure we have a finance policy on this.
Maybe Mr. Schmidt can help to find that out as well.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to agenda item 14, which is comments from the public. I do have one green card here, and it looks like we've got another one on the way. First up is Chris Clock. And the same rules do apply. If you could give us your name and address, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Chris Clock, 4538 Seneca Drive. Thank you for allowing us to speak again. During the discussion, additional points came up that I thought would be helpful for you to have the history. So it did come before the Planning Commission back in 2019, you're correct. And it wasn't just denied because it wasn't in the master plan. There were multiple reasons for the denial. And again, in July 2024, it was denied by the Planning Commission. There are volumes of letters, emails, public comments that hopefully you can look at that and see the passion behind that. We also canvass and it's not just the neighbors that are surrounding the property. We went and spoke with surrounding neighborhoods. We got over 70 signatures of people who were opposed to this. I mean, we probably could have kept going and gotten many more signatures than we did. And a little bit about how it got added to the master plan. We feel like that we didn't even know that it was added to the master plan. There was no input from the public. Well, we didn't know it was being added to the master plan. Let's just leave it at that. There is a self-described governmental liaison for the church who also works for the township, who got it added to the master plan for the financial benefit of the church, so they could have their mortgage burning party. It wasn't something that was done for the good of the surrounding community. We didn't know about it, or trust me, we would have been there. We did also, and it's currently zoned single-family residential. We're not anti-development. If there were homes built there tomorrow, wonderful. We would welcome them. The community needs more affordable homes for first-time home buyers, for empty nesters, for young families. We welcome that. If they built tomorrow, we would be the welcoming committee. We're not opposed to development at all. It's the density of the development. We did meet with the builder on August 22nd. Had a discussion. The same information that you saw today is what was presented to us, so there was nothing different. There was no consideration of changing to RD or RDD designation because it wouldn't make enough money. So that was where we left it, and there was no consensus at that meeting because it was just the same thing that you were presented with today. So just a little bit of background. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah Major. And then that is the last green card. If anyone else wishes to speak, please send in a green card now.
Right, well, my dear neighbor has spoken of many of the things that I jotted down, but I just wanted to reiterate, again, my name is Deborah Major. I live at 4570, I can't speak, it's actually past my bedtime, 4570 Seneca Drive. For 24 years. And so I appreciate your willingness to vote no right now. And should you hear from Mr. Fidowa, I just really am concerned that you did not receive all of that information. We were told by Brian Shorkey that all of the things that we had presented at the Planning Commission would be given to you in a packet and that you would be able to go over them. And it felt like, therefore, we wouldn't need to reiterate everything. But tonight it seems as if you don't have all of that information, and so we feel the need to reiterate, just you make sure that you know everything. So if you do consider rezoning any portion of that, please make sure you have read our things first, because all of the concerns, the concerns in 2024 and the concerns in 2019, because each and every one of them, no matter how old they are still valid, because nothing has changed to make that a more viable place to build multi-density housing. In fact, it has become less desirable due to the increase of traffic. One of our neighbors, Brad Shaw and Esther Shaw, who live right there on Dobie Road, they are right across from the property, and they have multiple accidents or slide-offs into their front yard because when there is slippery roads, there's no place to stop except in their front yard. So they have witnessed that firsthand. And you can't widen that road. You're going to be just at the mercy of what we have with more cars. So I really hope that you will think about that. Just to reiterate the point about meeting with Mr. Fidowa, we did that in good faith. He invited us by email. He had our emails from our correspondence with the board, the Planning Commission, and he invited us, and we went in good faith. There were about 12 of us neighbors, as well as Mr. Shorkey was there, and Mr. Fidowa and his sons. And again, they presented us with the same proposal. We don't doubt that they're great builders. I don't know that firsthand, but we've heard good things. We're not questioning their ability to build houses and their quality. We're questioning the viability of that particular housing development on that property next to all of our homes. It just doesn't fit. So, we listened thinking that we would hear something different, and we were disappointed not to. We support these single-family homes, and, we're very neighborly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 9:37 PM. Next on our agenda is item 15, other matters and board member comments. Board members.
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Chief Grillo, for the card of, I can't read it, Reno?
Reno.
Very cute. I will add it with my other dog cards from the Okemos School District that I have.
There's more coming for Aries too, they just have misprints on the cards.
Misprints raise the value.
We look forward to it. Dogs always bring smiles.
I do have two items just to quickly touch on. I had asked Mr. Schmidt about this, and I will mention it to my fellow board members as well. I would like to look at the possibility of having a board retreat around the weekend of November 22nd or 23rd. This is the weekend prior to, sorry. I'm sorry. It's the weekend prior to.
Sure, do it then.
Prior to Thanksgiving, with the intention of inviting new members, whomever they may be, to go through sort of an early tutorial.
We're going to have our own meeting.
An early tutorial, as well as begin the process of looking at our goals, so we can attempt to have that discussion before the end of the year. So if you could, I know we're a couple months out, but pencil that on your calendars if you would. I'd appreciate it. And then the second item is, we did get an email from a resident about the Senior and Community Center. And in that response, I did, it will either be in this packet or the next one. I did lay out one of my goals, which is to reconstitute the Senior and Community Center Task Force with a slightly broader membership, including members of the Senior Center Advisory Board, the Okemos and Hazlet School Districts, and other, interested community groups from throughout the community, as well as, of course, our staff and the several board members. My hope is that we can get those meetings started relatively soon, once we've completed our budget work. As we saw, this is a long meeting discussing that. And to do so in the evenings, so residents who are working can attend probably around the same time as this meeting. I'm thinking perhaps on alternate Tuesdays from the board. So September 24th may be a date to look at as when we might get back together and either do that monthly or bi-weekly, depending on what we think the need is. And so I would ask if we could to, start to think about that. I would endeavor to be a part of this task force more actively this time around. I know it's an issue that I'm very much interested in. I'm sure there are others on the board who are as well. So consider that. And hopefully I'll bring something back for those who are interested by next meeting. If you want to reach out to me, if you're interested in that as a board member to be a part of it, I'll be happy to, put together a more formal process for that.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Any other board member comments?
That date doesn't work for me. I'm taking a vacation. So
24th?
The 24th.
Okay.
But any time after that would work.
Okay, so noted. Any other comments or discussion? All right, seeing none. Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry, Trustee Trezise.
Just that, we will have a meeting tomorrow with the the policy committee, and hope to have a draft policy to present to the board at our next meeting, dealing with board responsibilities. And then we will continue working on the employee manual. So
Fabulous. Looking forward to
We
that.
would ask you to read the board policy manual carefully and bring back any comments. We'll get it to you as soon as we can.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other hands, next up on our agenda is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by trustee Wilson, supported by trustee McCurtis. Any discussion? Nope, there's no discussion on adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 9:42 PM.